Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the Township of Morris Planning Board meeting of January 10th, 2022, reorganization and regular meeting of the Township of Morris. Statement of adequate notice has been made in accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act, and statement certifying the same has been executed. This meeting is being held by Zoom in order to comply with executive orders signed by the governor and in effort to follow the best practices recommended by the CDC. The reorganization and regular meeting of this Township of Morris Planning Board is held by Zoom. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I will ask Mr. Kaplan, our board attorney, to administer the oath of office and oath of allegiance to the following board members: Mr. Mark Jorfi, Ms. Catherine Wilson, Mr. Edward Benoit, Mr. Richard Bai, Mr. Jesse Flowers, and Ms. Ginny McKay.
All right, everybody can just, is that what it's called? Sir. Raise the right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
I do solemnly
swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States
And the Constitution of the State of New Jersey.
and the
the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
And I will bear faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States.
I will
and I will bear faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States,
And this state under the authority of the people.
in this state under the authority of the people.
So help me God.
So help me
So
God.
help me God.
I do solemnly swear or affirm I will faithfully,
I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully,
impartially, and justly perform all duties of the office of the planning board, regular member
Impartially.
or alternate member,
impartially and
Impartially,
justly perform all duties of the planning board
Planning board
say regular member or alternate member, depending on your position,
as regular.
regular member
Alternate night.
or alternate.
accordingly to the best of my ability, so help me God.
According
according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
Congratulations.
Congratulations and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
At this time, I will do a roll call. Mr. Quillen,
Here.
Mr. Alesso,
Here.
Mr. Jorfi,
Here.
Ms. Murphy,
Here.
Mr. Benoit,
Here.
Mr. Bai,
Here.
Ms. Wilson,
Here.
Mr. Nunn,
Here.
Ms. Van Order,
Here.
Mr. Flowers,
Here.
Ms. McKay,
Here.
Mr. Phillips,
Here.
Mr. Fishinger,
Here.
Mr. Slate,
Here.
and sitting in for Mr. Warner, Mr. Kaplan.
Here.
At this time, I will entertain a nomination for chairman of the planning board for the year 2022.
Sonia, this is Tanya Van Order. I would like to nominate Edward Benoit for chairperson of the planning board for the year 2022.
Are there any other nominations?
Second.
Any seconds?
I'll second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposes? Mr. Benoit, you may have your chair.
Okay. Take a minute to move around a little bit.
I just want to say those members that you were just sworn in, I will be sending you your oath of office for signature. Can you please sign and scan and resend to me, please?
Thank you very much, Sonia. So at this moment, I'm entertaining nominations for vice chair.
This is Linda Murphy. I'd like to nominate Joe Lesso for the position of vice chair for 2022.
Linda Murphy for Joe Alesso. Do I have a second for that?
Second it.
Second by Chief Nunn. Any other nominations for vice chair? Hearing none, we'll close nominations. We have a roll call, please.
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Yeah. Thank you. Well, technical meanderings going on here. Thank you. At this point, we have resolutions for professionals. We'll do each one individually. First resolution is for legal counsel. Authorizing the award of a non-fair and open contract for legal services to Stephen Warner. Ventura, Niskowitz, Keogh, and Warner, $163 an hour plus a minimum of $244 to attend regular and special meetings. Do I have a motion on that resolution?
I'll make a motion to accept that, Steve Warner, his firm for counsel for the year 2022.
Mr. Russell, do you have a second?
Second.
A second?
Was Kathy Wilson? Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Roll call? All in favor?
Mr.
Aye.
Do
Quillen?
we need to have, okay.
Doing a roll call?
We'll do a roll call.
Yes.
Yes. My vote is yes.
Ms. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Dorothy?
Yes.
Mr. Bai?
Yes.
I'm not missing. Hold on, guys. It's in order.
Yes.
Mr. Nunn?
Yes.
Mr. Alesso?
Yes.
So move. Did I get everybody? Yes.
I'm a yes too.
And Mr. Benoit?
Yes. Next resolution is authorizing contract for our planning consultant, Paul Phillips. Do I have a motion on that resolution?
So moved. One question, do we need to do each one individually or can we do these as a block?
Could do either way.
Let's do them individually, Mr. Chair.
Individual.
Okay. Just asking.
It's a good question.
Motion?
Was that a motion, Kathy?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Okay.
I'll second. This is Murphy.
On the roll call?
Mr. Quillen?
Yes.
Mr. Alesso?
Yes.
Mr. Nunn?
Yes.
Mr. Dorothy?
Yes.
Ms. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Bai?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Nunn? Did
Yes.
I say none?
Yeah, I'll vote twice.
I did, ban order.
Yes.
Okay, so move. Mr. Benoit?
Yes.
So move.
The next resolution is authorization for a contract for radio frequency consultant to Ronald E. Grave. Do I have a motion on this resolution?
I'll make a motion to accept Mr. Grave.
Mr. Alesso? a
Second,
Ms.
Captain.
Wilson, second on the roll call?
Mr. Quillen. Mr. Quillen,
He's having technical difficulties.
Mr. Alesso,
Yes.
Mr. Jorfi,
Yes.
Ms. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. By,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
yes.
Mr. Nunn,
Yes.
Van Order,
Yes.
Mr. Benoit,
Yes.
so moved.
And the next resolution is a resolution authorizing a contract for professional services for board traffic consultant to Joseph Fishinger. We have a motion on this resolution.
So moved.
Ms. Wilson,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Quillen.
Mr. Quillen,
Yes.
Mr. Alesso,
Yes.
Mr. Jorfi,
Yes.
Ms. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. By,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. Nunn,
Yes.
Ms. Van Order,
Yes.
Mr. Benoit,
Yes,
so moved.
thank you. The next item on the agenda are appointments, professional appointments for,
What about the official newspapers? No?
it's later on.
Okay.
I have it on my agenda here. Appointments for the year 2022, Board Engineer James Slate, alternate engineer David Hanson, alternate Board Engineer, second alternate Bernard Singer, and of course, Board Secretary is Sonia Santiago.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know what we would do without you guys.
Really, thank you.
The next appointments are committees. We have several committees, a technical coordinating committee. I'd like to name Steve Warner, Paul Phillips, and James Slate to the technical coordinating committee. Continue your good work. And we have a site inspection committee. Chief Nunn,
Yes.
you would chair that committee.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Lesso, I'd like to appoint you, and Mr. Bai.
Yes.
Thank you. And we have a street naming committee, which hasn't been that active, but we have a committee. And I'll nominate myself and Mr. Quillen for a
Okay,
sign.
very good.
Thank you, George. Maybe we'll get to name a few streets during this year. The Legislative Committee, I'd like to appoint Chair Kathy Wilson to continue your good work on that. And as a member, Mayor Jorfi. You okay with that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you. Great. And we have an open space designee to the Open Space Committee. I'd like to assign Jesse Flowers to continue that work.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, thank you. That's great. And then we have resolution setting the meeting dates for the year for 2022, including January of 2023. We have a resolution in front of us. We'll do that first before the official newspaper. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion that we accept those dates for our meetings for the calendar year 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Lesso. Second,
I'll second that.
Mr. Bai.
Can you please state your name when you make a motion, please?
Joseph Alesso.
Thank you.
Motion.
And I think that was Mr. Bly with the second.
Yes, that was. Yes, that was.
Get to recognize everyone's voices. On the roll call?
Mr. Quillen.
Yes.
Jesus Christ. Ms. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Jorfi,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. By.
Yes.
Did I call Murphy? Yes. Oh my God, I lost my track. Sorry, guys. New members. Loss of order. Who am I missing? Mr.
Sonia, it's Tanya. You're missing me.
I'm missing Tanya. Van Order. Yes. Okay. Am I missing somebody, Mr. Benoit?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. who? Oh, Mr. Nunn.
Yes.
See, I'm telling you, I'm lost tonight. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a resolution designating official newspapers for the board, Daily Record, and the Morris Newsbee, or the Star Ledger. I have a motion on this resolution.
I'll make a motion, Joseph Alesso, that we approve those newspapers for our official notices for 2022.
I'll second. Mike, no.
Mr. Nunn, second. On the roll call.
Mr. Quillen,
Yes.
Ms. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Jorfi,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mr. By,
Yes.
Ms. Van Order,
Yes.
Mr. Nunn,
Yes.
Mr. Benoit,
Yes.
so move. I still forgot one, see, Mr. Alesso,
Yes.
thank you.
He usually makes himself known.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, before we proceed with the hearings, I would like to welcome our new members, Jean McKay and Mark Jorfi, Mayor Jorfi. Very happy to have you on board. We had a very busy 2021. I think we had 26 hearings.
Hope I don't have one this year.
I can't promise you we'll have that few this year, or that many. But we had a good board last night. We learned a lot last year, and I'm looking forward to continuing those efforts again this year. I want to thank Jerry Lohman and Jeff Grazel for their service last year. I believe Jeff is moving on to the Board of Adjustment. And I'm assuming we'll be doing something for Jerry. He had many, many years of service on the planning board, and I don't even know what other areas in the township. So he really deserves our thanks for all the time and effort he's placed into the planning board. And I'd like to thank Linda Murphy for being vice chair last year. She graciously works for the planning board, and she's elected to the Board of Education. She puts in lots and lots of time in the township and volunteering in many, many other areas. And so I really appreciate her time and her talent. And I always appreciate her wisdom and thoughts on the applications. And I'm glad she's still with us, decided to come back and stay with the board. So be looking forward to working with her as well.
Thank you, Ed.
And of course, to our professionals who we worked with so well last year. Mr. Phillips, Mr. Warner, Mr. Kaplan, Mr. Fishinger, Mr. Slate, Mr. Hanson, and then occasionally Liz Laney. I'm going to forget somebody, I'm going to feel badly, Rich Oliver on occasion. And I'd like to thank Mark Daly for all of his work on the IT. Did I miss anybody? Amanda Wolf. So we have a big operation going on, a lot of people, and we get a lot of work done. I really appreciate everyone's efforts. Just an announcement, this year, starting tonight, our meeting times will be from 7 o'clock to 10:30. We're going to have hard stops at 10:30. And that includes any business items that we have after the last hearing. We can extend the time by resolution of the board if the board is eager to. But we decided as a board that once it gets too late, it's hard to pay attention as well and be observant as well. We thought it'd be best to have a hard stop so that our minds are fresh in the event that we're going to be deliberating, that we can put the time into what we need to do, where we decided that we're better off holding off on certain decisions and holding off to another meeting if we need to be sure we're fresh in our thoughts and our deliberations. So that's why we've decided to stick with the 10:30 cutoff time. Board members, does anyone want to say anything before we proceed to the hearings?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you very eloquently thanked everyone for their services last year, and I would be remiss if we didn't thank you for your services last year. You did a great job, and looking forward to 2022 being just as profitable.
Well, thank you very much, John. Appreciate your willingness to step up as vice chair. I hope to keep you very busy and to use all the wisdom you have in your life in the participation of this board, because your contribution has been very good, and really everyone's contribution to the board, all the board members, has been really, really helpful, really very good contributions. So I really appreciate that. So any other board members like to say anything? If not, we'll proceed to the hearings. Unless I'm forgetting something. We're good?
Order.
I'm sorry?
Let me announce the order. The order.
Sure. Okay, Mr. Kaplan.
Your permission, Mr. Chair, prior to this meeting, we decided that items 11 and 12, 11 being the Weisgerber subdivision application, number 12 being the courtesy review application for the County Morris. We're going to pull the County Morris application forward and do that first, and then we'll proceed with the Weisgerber application. So with your permission, Mr. Chair, counsel for the counties present, I saw him earlier. If you would like to start your presentation, counsel.
Yes, please. Just two items. We have the site inspection report of September 29th. Last year, there were no comments, but there were 3 comments on the environmental commission report. The sound levels, the generator mounted on pads designed to contain spills, and plantings should be native New Jersey species. So during your discussion, if you could please be sure to address those issues. I appreciate that.
Chairman Benoit,
Yes.
this is Tanya Van Order. I'm just letting you know and let the record reflect that I'm recusing myself from the discussion around the County of Morris Housing Authority.
Thank you, Ms. Van Order. Okay. Council may proceed.
We need to sit one of the alternate members.
So then we need to see one of the alternate members. That would
Flowers.
be Mr. Flowers. Okay, thank you.
Did you announce it? Mr. Flowers, you're sitting in for the Morris County Housing Authority.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Santiago.
And council may proceed.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, board members, board professionals. Luke Pontier of the law firm Day Pitney, here on behalf of the applicant, the Morris County Housing Authority. The Housing Authority is a political subdivision of the County of Morris and is the owner of property located at the intersection of West Hanover Avenue and Ketch Road. That is block 1901, lots 2 and 3 on the township's tax map. And the property is located in the SC district. As mentioned by counsel for the board, tonight's presentation is not a public hearing, but rather a courtesy review of a capital project pursuant to the municipal land use law, and that's under NJSA 40:55D-31. Just as a brief overview before I introduce a couple individuals that will be presenting tonight, the property is approximately 8.41 acres and currently consists of 6 buildings, including 5 residential rental buildings and a community center, along with surface parking, utilities, and landscaping. For this project, the applicant is proposing to install 5 generators for each of the existing residential buildings. 3 of those proposed generators, as you'll hear more from the engineer tonight, are located within the required side yard setbacks under the Township Code. Specifically, generator number 1 and generator number 2 are each located 4 feet from the southern property line with lot 1.01, and generator 3 is located 3 feet from the western property line with lot 1. Each of lot 1 and lot 1.01 are also owned by the County of Morris. Prior to tonight, we did receive a few review memoranda from township agencies as well as board professionals, those being a summary of a TCC that the applicant attended, which was prepared by the board's planner and dated October 5th of 2021, a memorandum from the Township Environmental Commission, which was dated September 7th, 2021, and a memorandum from the Township Fire Department, which was dated September 27th of 2021. With me tonight to assist in the presentation are Kelly Stevens, an applicant representative of the Morris County Housing Authority, as well as Paul Presbolinski and Francois Rosafort of LS Engineering Corporation, who are the project engineers for this. Although not required under the municipal land use law, notice was published for the courtesy review tonight before you in the Daily Record, published on December 29th, 2021. And it was also mailed to property owners within 200 feet of the property, both in Morris Township and in the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills on December 29th, 2021. An affidavit of service and mailing certifying to those mailings and publication was provided to board secretary. And unless there are any other preliminary matters that the chair or anyone on the board would like to go over, I'd like to call up Ms. Stevens to give some brief history on the property, its use, and the housing authority.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
As council stated, notice is not required for this application, but the applicant did provide notice both to the property owners within 200 feet and in the newspaper. Our office did review that notice and it was sufficient in both content and time. It was sent out and published more than 10 days prior to this hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you, counsel. Are there any other matters to address prior to calling up Ms. Stevens? All right, great. I'd like to introduce Kelly Stevens, again from the Morris County Housing Authority.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Kelly. I am on. Good evening, everybody. I'm Kelly Stevens from Morris County Housing Authority. I'm the executive director. We provide subsidized housing to low-income seniors, families, and people with disabilities. Specifically, we will be covering the Morris Muse Senior Citizen Complex. Currently, we do have a generator that services the congregate living facility. However, over the last few years, we really have identified that by not having a generator for the 5 smaller buildings have presented a problem, particularly since the power outages have lasted for several days. Many of you may have heard about it or have received calls. We do have a 24-hour battery backup for our emergency systems, such as the fire exits, the alarm panel, as well as the backup lighting. However, since the power outages have lasted more than several days, it leaves the tenants with no elevator, with no lighting in the hallway, no exit signs if there was an emergency. Our maintenance staff does have to do fire watch in case there is a fire during those times. So we really feel that for safety and security reasons for the 120 apartments there, it's really beneficial to have a smaller generator for those common systems for when the power does go out. There is also an office there that provides support services for our public housing, our Section 8 program, as well as accounting, social services, and our maintenance department. That also has our server system. So in order to continue functioning without the power, without our server, is really problematic for the housing authority. So it would be the common areas, like I said. The apartments are individually metered, so it would be the laundry room, the day room. Tenants could go in there if they need to power up their phones, if they need to make some coffee, get together. If people are on oxygen, they can go into the day rooms and plug in their equipment. Like I said, it would be the fire exits, the fire alarm panel, the emergency lighting, and the elevator as well.
Thank you. And understanding that more technical testimony on the specifications for the generators and things of that nature will be presented by the engineers. Does the board or any of the board professionals have any questions for Ms. Stevens?
No questions.
No
Board
questions.
members, questions?
Linda Murphy has a question.
Yes, Linda.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Just a quick question. I may have misunderstood what you said. When you said the generator was going to power the day room in each of the residences, are you suggesting that the apartments themselves will not receive power?
We cannot do the actual individual apartments because they're individually metered. So we don't have the capability or the funding sources to actually provide it for the whole entire building because they are individually metered. It would just be the actual common areas that the housing authority provides the electricity for. So it would be the hallways, the day rooms, the laundry room, the first floor, the elevator, heating and cooling in the hallways, the emergency lighting, the exit lighting, as well as the fire alarm panel.
Thank you.
Any other board members with questions?
Chairman, I have one question.
Awesome.
Yeah, so the on the map, the congregate building is not shown on the map, correct?
Correct, because they, well, let me just take a look at it.
So it's a separate lot and it has
Right.
its own generator.
And they already have their own generator. So you'll see that at the top of the map on the left-hand side, that's the congregate building. And then the generator is in the corner. So they won't be serviced by any of these 5 generators.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other board members? Professionals?
Mr. Quinlan has his
I have a
hand
question.
Mr. Crowan, I'm sorry.
I have a couple of questions. Following up on Ms. Murphy's question, you mentioned, Ms. Stevens, that the individual apartments would not have power supplied by these generators. Do the residents of the apartments have heat and hot water during a power failure?
They actually have their own heaters in each apartment as well as their own hot water heaters. But because it's individually metered, we couldn't provide it to all the apartments. But if it's certainly cold, they can utilize the other spaces in the building for heat and warmth. They also can go over to the congregate building if necessary, where we have larger community areas and dining rooms. But they do not provide heat to the actual individual unit.
Okay, so this, it sounds like it's not the perfect solution, but it's the best you can do.
Correct. It's not the ideal situation. Would be a tremendous one that would be able to do the whole entire complex. But the way that it's structured, this is the best that we can do. And we really have identified over the last few years that this is something that really should be addressed just because of safety and security reasons.
And the building that's in the center of this complex, that's a kind of group gathering building. does that have, what kind of power generation does that have? That has a generator that's being proposed in this proposal.
Correct. That has no generator. That actually is the office building, which we provide. You know, we have people from the public that come in for interviews. We do all of our recertifications there, lease ups. It's office space. If you're referring to the actual gathering area, that would be our congregate living facility, which is the last building if you pull into the driveway with the dining room and the community room. That does have a generator already.
Okay, the central building, that's the office building, would the generator supply heat for that building?
Yes, yes, because it's owned by the housing and operated by the housing authority. So it's on its own meter. So yes, it would provide heat as well as cooling if the tenants also need to utilize that space.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quillen. Any other board members?
Mr. Chair, if I could just say, comment, I actually applaud the Housing Authority for taking the initiative and moving forward. Over the last couple of years, the fire department has worked closely with the county fire marshal's office to address the issues that she speaks of with the fire alarm panel. And I think this is the best solution and resolution to the issue, and it's going to be a big welcome to the residents of the apartments up there. I can understand it doesn't look all that. It's addressing the entire issue, but it's a big welcome to the from a fire safety perspective and from a occupancy perspective. So
Chief.
it's good.
Thank you. Any other board members? Any members of the public would like to ask this witness a question? Seeing none, let's proceed with Counselor, your next witness.
Sure, thank you. Next up, I would like to call Mr. Presbolinski and Mr. Rosafort, both from LS Engineering Associates. Prior to having them begin testimony, I do have one logistical question for Mr. Slate, and that is if I will be able to share my screen to show an exhibit, or if I'm unable to do that due to sharing the meeting room currently.
No, you can share. The meeting room will go away. So once you go to share your screen, you have the ability to do that.
Okay, great. And then a legal question for Mr. Kaplan. If you would like each of Mr. Presbolinski and Rosafort to be sworn in and give their credentials, given that it is not a formal public hearing, but we are happy to do so if you'd like us to.
Let's do so for the record, make sure everything's clear.
Sure, absolutely. So we'll start with Paul Presbolinski. If you could please provide the board with your name and the address of your firm, and as well as your education, experience, qualifications, and any professional licenses.
Let's just swear them both in at first real quick. You can both raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you're going to give this evening is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Proceed.
And Mr. Presbolinski, if you could please provide the board again with your name, address of your firm, and education, experience, and qualifications, please.
Yes, sir. Members of the board and attendees, my name is Paul Presbolinski. I'm a certified, registered New Jersey professional engineer. I have multiple degrees in structural, civil, electrical, and mechanical engineering from the School of Newark College of Engineering, which is now known as NJIT. I've had practice for over 30 years in both residential, commercial, and industrial. I've served with firms for like DuPont Corporation, Amoco, Hampton Inns, Macy's, numerous other large firms in doing site developments and also doing structural, electrical, mechanical work. I also have licenses in several other states.
No
Based on
objection
those
to
qualifications.
no objection to this qualifications.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Our firm is LSEA Associates, where our current address is 150 Riverside Road in Montville, New Jersey. And we were contracted by the Morris Housing County Authority to prepare this site plan of putting in additional sub-power generators for emergency services in case they had an issue like we had with Storm Sandy.
Thank you. And Mr. Rosafort, if we could go through your experience, education, and qualifications as well for the board.
Okay, my name is Francois Rosefort. I've been working as a civil engineer, although I have a background of electromechanical engineer. And I worked for 30 years in the field from multiple firms, starting with New York State DOT, moved to Steinman, who became Parsons, and then retired. Actually, I'm providing substantial help to this firm, LSEA, along with Mr. Paul, expertise. And I've been very instrumental into this particular job this project for Morris County. I have designed many different things for same Morris County in the past.
No objection to this witness.
Thank
Let me
you.
proceed.
Mr. Prespolinski, could you please take the board through the location of the site and then as well where the generators are proposed on this property? And I'm going to share my screen so that the board can see, in case they don't have it in front of them. This is the site plan that was submitted to the board.
Yes. This is the address of this location is 99 Ketch Road in Morristown. It's at the intersection of West Hanover Road and Ketch Road. West Hanover Road is at the top of this site drawing. The name is blocked right now. Ketch Road is to the right side, and you can see the entrances into the development. What's being shown right now, right, the first one that was being showed was the entrance, and the one that's now shown is the egress out. So it's one way in, one way out to control traffic. The generator locations will start at the bottom and go clockwise. Building number 1, as he's screening up. Okay, building number 1 has its own generator, which is again shown about 4 feet off the property line. It's in the side yard setback. Then building number 2 is positioned basically the same way. All of these generators are natural gas powered generators. So there is gas service coming into this site from the utility company, PSE&G, the utility company. The reason for these 2 locations here for buildings 1 and 2 are because where you could see up near the bottom edge of buildings 1 and 2, the sidewalk, you see the word gas. There's numerous underground utilities there, water, electric, and gas. If we were to try and place these generators at these locations by the building, it would be extensive rework of underground utilities and start to make the actual project cost a little prohibitive for trying to accomplish this activity. That's the main reason for why they were placed outside and on the edge within the side yard setback. We could not locate them in any of the parking spaces because of zoning requirements that you have to have a set amount of parking spaces for the set amount of residential units that you have there. So if we were to take away any parking spaces to try and fit in the generators, we would then be in violation of the zoning for this site because of the reduction in parking. The next building is building number 3. And again, that location is within the side yard setback. Same reason the buildings have surrounding utilities up around their edge. So Our problem here again was gas, water, and electric underground routing utilities. Again, would have caused major problems in trying to just reroute the services just for this generator. Basically, what's going to happen is that the gas line, when it comes in, we'll have to do some in-cutting into the existing parking and roadway in there, minimizing the amount of road disturbance, and then we'll be tying into the gas meter system in each building, which will then monitor the system of gas usage. As far as building number 3, that's lot 1.01, that's county. And that area over there is totally, it's just wild growth over and trees. There are no residents or office spaces in that area. In fact, the back side is also where the county has a solar panel system installed that they use for generating electricity and putting it back into the utility grid system. Okay, if we go to just to the right a bit, that's the community center. You see a generator right there where it says community center. The other square just below it is and adjacent to it. That is the office building complex. The community center is also the area where they have a general meeting area, and they could support people in case there was a loss of power at the site. It would be able to help supply area. The property line that's just slightly to the left and upward a little bit, that is what's known as the congregate building. That is the property of the Morris County Housing Authority. That's the 6th building on the site. It has its own generator currently right now. That's why it's not currently shown. We do have a overview map from Google Earth Pro where I dotted in the locations of the generators, and it does show the property of the congregate building and also depicts the location and view of the solar panel system that's out there. So we are not really.
So I will, I'm going to switch over, if I may, I'm going to switch over to the exhibit that Mr. Prespolinski is referring to. And that is an aerial map based on Google Maps that also has an overlay of the generator locations, which was prepared by Mr. Prespolinski.
Right. We just want to provide this so you had a physical view of what the area looked like with these generators are sized at. We could probably go back to the site plan because we just have the one generator number 4, which is in the upper right. And that, again, that's off to the parking area. That generator is going to supply power for both buildings 4 and 5. So we were able to reduce the amount of physical units by combining power needs for this generator at that location. And it shows there that we have a setback of, we're like 69 4-foot-inch from the property line off of Kelch Road. There is no residential units. It's all open, wooded, overgrown property across from the Morris County Housing Authority along Kelch Road in this area.
Thank you. And if you could now review, the technical specifications for the board of the generators that are proposed.
Sure. The generators we have, excuse me one moment, let me just get to my papers. We have a total of 5 generators. Generator number 4 takes on buildings 4 and 5. So that's why when you see the numbering of the generators, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 6, because we combined 4 and 5 together. What we have is 3 of the generators are going to be 50 kW. That would be 1, 2, and 3. Generator number 4 and generator number 6. Let me get my notes out. Generator 4 and generator number 6, excuse me, generator 4 and is going to be a 6 kW. Generator number 6, excuse me, yeah, for generator, generator building 6, it's going to be a 50 kW. So we apologize. Building number 1, building number 2, building number 3, and for building number 6, which is the community center, those are 50 kW. For building number 4, combined with building number 5, generator number 4, I apologize for a little bit of confusion with the numbers, that's a 60 kW generator. The units that are being supplied for this are the what's called Caterpillar makes the generators. These generators will also have weather protective and sound attenuating enclosures on the engines to help reduce sound transmission. We provided documentation from the manufacturer about the decibel levels of sound that's generated from these units with the sound attenuation enclosures. That's in the material that was provided to the board. I also have copies of it here. In addition to the sound attenuation enclosures, we are surrounding each generator with a PVC fence that's made by the CertainTeed Corporation. It's not a standard PVC fence. It's a product that it's like sandwich. It's a sound absorbing material. It has the ability to reduce transmission of sound by 26 decibels. So what we came up with from what Caterpillar supplied us in the distance from the generator unit itself to the edge of the fence, and then from the fence out. From the fence out, we are at meeting the zoning requirements of not exceeding 60 dB. The only issue we have on hand would be for generators 1 and 2. Luke, if you could scroll the screen up a little bit so we could just take a look at.
Sure, and while I have you, just to the height of the fence as well, if you could
correct
reiterate for the board.
Right. For generators 4, 3, and 6, those heights are 6 feet with no problem. But because we have a residence that's near the generators 1 and 2, we are requesting to go to a height of 8 feet to make sure that we are totally enclosing and not allowing any sound to go out. These enclosures are open at the top. They're not a concealed room. It's not a shed type of unit. It's opened at the top. The exhibit number 2 that Luke had put up earlier showed from Google Earth Pro that this was shown when the leaves had and foliage had degraded, fallen down. And you can see where there's a north arrow designation at the bottom right. Just to the right of that, that is the structure we are talking about as a residence. You can see from our drawing where I marked on it G1 and G2, the little white squares, those represent the locations of the generators there. There are trees that line that edge of the property right across through there. So when foliage is generated, the area is hidden. And like I said, we did some calculations with the material from the generator manufacturer, Caterpillar, and from CertainTeed Corporation about the sound attenuation quality of the fence material, that we are not exceeding 60 dB, which is the zoning requirement.
Thank you. And is there anything else that you'd like to add, or is that all the information that you have affirmatively for the board at this time?
The 3 memos that came from the review agencies, we addressed those things. From the TCC report, they advised us to explain to the planning board our reasoning for our locations, which I did, because of underground utilities will make it a problem, and we cannot remove parking spaces from the site without causing the site to then be in violation of the zoning requirements. Then they also advised that the generators meet the noise standards. We have that information from the generator manufacturer Caterpillar, which we did provide, and also from the fence manufacturer Certainty Corporation as to the sound deadening quality of the product that's going to be used to surround the generator units. Their third item was the deviation of a 6-foot high fence. That's what I just explained about at locations G1 and G2. We're proposing to go to 8 feet at that location. Also, because that structure is a 2-story structure that is adjacent, we want to hide any type of view from them of seeing the generators. We're providing it's a normal fence. It's not anything obstructive. The product information that we provided shows that it's a standard type of fence that you would find in any residential development. It's not something that looks industrial at all. It's very residential. We provided information. The TCC also recommended to provide a cut sheet on the material. We had supplied that, and we also supplied information on the drawing, which is on drawing sheets E9 and S1 about the generator information, their size shown in plan view, length. The length of the generators are 104 inches and the width is 42 inches. They're not very large pieces. And we did also, the TCC advised that we provide notification to the surrounding property owners, in which Mr. Pointier explained in the beginning before we started that this was done so, out in advertisement. The second memo was from the Environmental Commission, and they went through a fact finding, they went through findings of an impact, and they had 3 items for recommendations. They recommended about, again, sound, noise level, pressure level at the property lines that we don't exceed. Again, we provided the technical information from the generator manufacturer for these units, and also what we're proposing to use for the surrounding fences on sound attenuation. So we provided that information. That's also in the drawings. They also indicated that there should be some type of lubricant containment, whether it's lubricating oil or possible coolant. The main fuel for these generators is natural gas, but of course, their mechanical components, their engines, is going to be lubricating oil. They're going to be on raised concrete platforms, and there will be, we can place a curb around the platforms to contain any spillage of material. And they indicated about a potential landscaping plan if required. That could be done. And then what they were advising is if something does have to be provided, that we use species native to New Jersey for this location. The third comment was from the fire department, and I believe they had no issues with that at all. Mr. Pointier?
Great, thanks so much. And at this time, I'd like to open it up to the board and board professionals if they have any questions of the project engineers.
Board members, any questions of this witness? Ms. Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have just a couple of questions. While this aerial's on the screen, can you just point out the location of the generator for the congregate building?
Congregate building. Okay,
Yeah.
Congregate building is Luke, all right, let me direct you a little bit with your hand. Come down a little bit. Right, now go to the left. Go to that's the congregate building there. Now, if you look in the
back
upper
corner.
right, in the upper left-hand corner of the parking lot, you'll see a bluish color,
Okay,
that's the generator for the congregate building right there.
okay. I just wasn't sure. I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
So, on the, help me understand a little bit more clearly the sound thing. It's the limit is 60 decibels at where?
The property line.
So the
The
property
way it's
line,
set up, the property line, we can't exceed 60 dBs transmission beyond the property line.
so it's 3 or 4 feet from the property line, meaning that beyond that distance, it will be no more than 60 decibels.
Correct. And I did calculation with the information from the Caterpillar manufacturer's information for the generators at G1 and G2 and combining it with the sound absorption ability of the CertainTeed fencing product. We are actually at 59.5 dB just outside the screening.
Wow, okay, good, thank you. How long, when you do the work, you'll have to shut the power off, right, during that? How long does that take?
It's what it is, everything will be prepped first, and it'll probably be just a couple of hours per tie-in. It's not going to be all done at once at the same time. We're going to have to do it in stages so that we don't create a massive blackout at the site just because we're installing a backup system.
Yeah,
It's going to be staged so that we're trying to minimize any downtime per building. So
Yeah.
everything will be prepped and installed ahead of time. The cut-ins, as they're called, will be done at the last end, and it'll be staged one building at a time.
okay, thank you. And lastly, I'd just like to say I appreciated your large print on your plans. It was nice to be able to read it so easily without having to get a magnifying glass. So that was very
Welcome.
clear. I appreciate that. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. I know, I'm with glasses too now.
Yeah,
Quick story, I had an optometrist when I was just getting out of high school, and he says, "Oh, you're going into engineering. You're gonna need glasses." I looked at him and said, "Wait a minute, you just said I had a great exam. I don't need glasses." He says, "Yeah, but you're gonna be an engineer. You're gonna wear your eyes out."
well, you made up for it because the print is very easy to read. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Quillen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of my questions was already answered. I have one more question, which has to do with the side yard setback. I thought in the materials that were submitted to us that there was a statement that the side yard setback was not, should not be considered much of an issue because the neighboring property is also owned by the county. I see that's true on the left-hand side of this diagram, but is it true on the bottom of the diagram as well?
The portion that's behind where the generators are, G1, G2,
Yes.
that is county property over in that area. So to the right of that, that's the other residence area. That's
Oh, I
what,
see
even
it.
though we're there.
Okay, so I see a kind of triangular region. Do you have a map of where that private property is? And how
I
do
do
you
not
have
have a zoning map of that.
you do not have a
It's
zoning map?
approximately where my hand is, if you follow on the screen right now. The property line is in between the two residential buildings there, building 1 and building 2,
Okay.
and comes
Okay.
straight down. To the east is the residential property, and to the west is county-owned land.
Okay, and the county-owned land that's to the west of that vertical line is not being used at present? It's undeveloped? Is that true?
That is
I believe
correct.
that's correct, Ms. Stevens. Okay.
Are there any plans to use it?
At this point, the housing authority has no plans, but that could be, that's up to the county. I haven't heard of anything. I know in the past they have discussed possible development, but that would be a right of way through the actual complex with the seniors So I know that that would be an area of concern developing back here when they have to have cars come through the actual complex.
But because there's no access to that lot from the street network?
Correct, correct.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other board members?
Linda Murphy has her
Linda
hand.
Murphy.
Ms. Murphy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. I want to go back to the comment that was made by one of our agencies about, I think it was the Environmental Commission, not having a landscape plan. And as I look at this layout, it doesn't cause much concern except potentially for generators 1 and 2, which are close by or closer to a residence or something that's owned by a entity other or person other than the county. So I looked at the fencing that was proposed, which is very attractive fencing, but I'm just wondering if softening, particularly here where you're talking about an 8-foot fence, maybe softening the fence with a little bit of landscaping for that house that we see sitting there. It seems like an 8-foot wooden fence kind of out there in the middle may be better served with a little bit of screening.
Well, for screening, if we have to provide some type of natural growth screening, we would be using something like cedars, short cedars, because they are bushy. And they would also then add to the quality of sound absorption. And 2, because they are bushy, they would then provide a screening block, a visual sight block toward that residency.
Yeah, I would just like to recommend that consideration. Again, not so much for the other generator locations, but just for these 2 where there could be a visual advantage to having some kind of screening there.
There's one thing that the aerial photo does not enhance on is if you were to stand in the roadway parking area where there's generator 1 and 2, the side yard actually climbs upward. It's a steep gradient over there. So you're actually about 10 feet below the property line, and that property continues to elevate itself as you go toward that house.
Okay.
So they are anywhere between 12, maybe 15 feet. Their grade level is about 12 to 15 feet above the ground level of these generators to start with. So we would, if it was necessary, siting review, we could put a blind of planting over there, which wouldn't be a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. How is it determined whether it's necessary? It sounds like it hasn't been decided.
We haven't had any of the agencies come to us. The only one that said anything about a potential planting was the environmental group. And they just said, if you're going to do anything, make sure that the species are native to New Jersey and they're generic to this area of New Jersey. They didn't say you should, you shouldn't. They said if you go through their report.
Okay. If it turned out that the property owners are having a problem with the noise, is this something that could be done in the future?
Yes, that could be done in the future of putting a planting screening over there of plants.
Okay.
Aiding the assistance. But when we get started with the project and these generators are installed, they will be fired up and tested. And part of the startup and testing is they will have to provide sound readings. And that's also in the zoning too. We can't just put them in there and just let it go. We have to do test runs of our system and provide that information to the county to make sure that we are not exceeding the zoning requirements of sound.
Okay, thank you. I noticed we have the bid package. Has it been bid out yet, or that's the proposed bid?
It's just proposed. Nothing is going forward until we have gotten all our reviews and approvals.
Okay.
You know,
Right,
we're not putting the cart before the horse. We want to make sure the horse can do the work.
Great. Board professionals. Paul, do you have any comments, questions?
The only question is, would you be willing to limit the hours of the testing?
When you say testing, are you talking about the testing that will have to be done in the future when they start them up? Or
Yeah.
are you talking about the testing of when we're going to initiate to check to make sure that we're not violating the sound ordinance?
No, the normal maintenance testing.
Maintenance testing?
Be limited to, let's say, weekday 10 to 4 or something that's not going to have any effect on particularly the neighbor on Ketch Road.
Well,
I can attest to how our other systems are tested, and that's usually, it is during the week, usually on a Monday morning, and it's generally about 9 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
I think if you check the zoning regulations, there's a qualifying that you, even for construction, can't make any noise before 8 o'clock, and you have to be shut down by 8, 9 o'clock or sundown. And some places have it by sundown, and that does vary a little bit.
I think if the testing is 9 o'clock or after on a weekday, that would be adequate.
That can be set up with the testing agency.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Should we make that a condition?
Mr. Chair, this is, as you're aware, this is not a standard application. This is a courtesy review, so we can make any recommendations we would like.
Okay.
For instance, we can recommend all testing be done at 8 a.m. Monday or 9 a.m. Monday mornings or between 9 and 4. We can recommend that they comply with state noise laws. We can recommend a landscaping blind, as the county's engineer stated.
Okay, thank you. Jim?
Yes, wondering if the generators 1 and 2 can be combined similar to the generators for buildings 4 and 5. Is that an option, just to have one generator over there as opposed to 2?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Rosenfort. He's the one that did the initial site planning.
I can also tell you that buildings 4 and 5 do not have elevators or a third floor. So that's why we were able, and please, Francois, feel free to cut me off, but there's no third floor, so there's no elevator in that building. So we were able to combine the 2 buildings. I don't believe that that's possible for 1 and 2 because of the power that it pulls from each individual building.
Correct.
Okay, follow-up question, is it possible for those generators, I understand that there's utilities adjacent to the building. From your testimony, it sounded like it's between the parking lot and the building, but is it possible to locate it in the areas, open space areas to the east and west of the end of the parking lot, closer to the buildings rather than up against the property line?
For building 1, there certainly is no area that's a sidewalk area, and it's maybe about 2-3 feet in between. I don't know specifically for building 2. And Francois, maybe you could answer that, but I know specifically for building 1, there is no area on the side area. That's actually a steep incline after the sidewalk that exits onto Ketch Road.
Okay, it looks like there's a 20-foot wide grass strip, even if that is a steep slope. I mean, where these generators are going to be located is a steep slope as well. So I'm assuming there's some type of retaining wall that's going to be necessary for them. And then to the west of building 2, there's a large green space at that location. Again, it's not right up against the property line. I'm mainly concerned about 1 is awfully close to the neighbor's property. So, look for some sort of response on that. And I did note that in the acoustic performance test report, they specifically mentioned that the fencing system had a simulated stone surface as opposed to what's being proposed, the Sherwood wood grain fencing. I just wanted to make sure that that stone type fence has the same acoustical properties as the flat panel wood fence.
Yes, we'll get that double checked also from the supplier, but this is what they provided us with the pictorial. The fencing material is just an exterior, it's sandwiched. The plastic is like a costume that you would don. The quality of sound attenuation is the material that's sandwiched in between the two layers of plastic, the outside fence and the inside face. That's where the main acoustic absorption is handled. You can change the exterior appearance of the panels. The stone, the one with the stone also has a little bit more sound absorption quality because its surface is disproportionate. In other words, it's not a flat, smooth, it's roughened. And that's what aids in the sound attenuation quality.
And that's a concern. Just want to make sure that those two products, have the equivalent. I figured that the stone would offer more sound attenuation. I have no further questions.
Ms. Wilson, did you have a follow-up?
I have one quick question on testing. How, once they're installed, how often is the testing done? Once a week?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Kaplan?
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman.
No questions from the professionals, no more questions from the board. I'll open up to questions from the public.
Mr. Chair, if you would like, you can questions and general comments. We can do both
We
right
can
now.
do both at the same time. That's great. So any questions or comments from the general public on the project? Seeing none. Is council finished or is there more?
No, that is all of the testimony that we have for the board tonight.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any comments, questions? Resolution, motions?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Russo?
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask if I could make a motion to approve this application and move it forward.
I'll second that.
And second, by Mr. Nunn.
Mr. Chair,
Do you
if I
want
may-
to add?
Hold on.
We can just, for this hearing, we can do a general voice vote just with our recommendations so far that I have is that we recommend a landscaping blind. We recommend that the testing be done between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. And I believe landscaping, I believe that's it. If anybody else has any other recommendations.
I think it was 9 to 4, I think, versus 8 to 4.
Sorry,
Right.
9 to 4,
Thank
that's
you.
correct.
It sounds like it's already going to happen, but the sound readings after the install, I think that's critical to ensure that it meets the noise limits.
Yes.
And confirmation that the rock fence provides the same sound attenuation as the smooth wood fence.
And going forward, do they, for the purpose of the neighbors monitoring the sound to be sure that they have,
As
The limit?
as the county's engineer stated, there is sound testing with the testing of the
okay,
generators.
okay. Okay. Paul, did you have any additions to that?
No, I think it's been covered, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Then we can do a voice vote on this. All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Dunn?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right, thank you.
You.
Thank you, board. We appreciate your time. Have a great night.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good luck on your project.
Thank you.
All right, so at this point, we'll proceed to, does anyone need a break?
No.
No breaks. We'll proceed to our next application. Sonia, want to read this?
Our next application is BA 06-20, John and Mary Ann Weiss Gerber for the minor subdivision / variance. Lot 2601, lot 41, 5 Edward Chippen Lane in the RA 130 zone. This is a continuation from December 7th, March 15th, April 19th, June 7th, July 19th, September 20th, October 4th, and November 15th of 2021. Public hearings. Applicant proposes a minor subdivision to create one additional lot. Mr. Newmark.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yeah, please.
As stated by Ms. Santiago, the last hearing on this application was November 15th, 2021. At that time, we carried this matter without any further notice. The last witness we heard from was the objector's planner, Mr. Steck. Mr. Steck heard questions from the board and the board professionals. So at this time, we're going to open the floor to Mr. Newmark, the applicant's attorney, to cross-examine Mr. Steck.
Very good. I'll be with you in a moment. Let me just get organized here.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, we do have 9 members this evening to hear this application. If I am correct, Ms. Santiago, the 2 members that are not qualified to hear this are the Mayor, Mr. Giarfi, and our new alternate, Ms. McKay. And Mr. Flowers has been already elevated from an alternate to a full member.
Okay, thank you.
For the record, I believe Ms. Van Order is back.
I am.
May I ask for some clarification on that? Do we have 9 sitting members, all of whom are qualified to vote because they have either attended or the meeting before or the discs?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. Mr. Stack has already been sworn. Am I?
That's correct. Mr. Steck, you're aware you're still sworn in?
I am, thank you. Mr. Stack, good evening.
Good evening.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you. Mr. Steck, you gave your qualifications early on, and I have no dispute with your qualifications. You're highly qualified. And as such, I assume you own a copy of the Cox Treatise, New Jersey Zoning and Land Use Administration?
Yes.
And I'm going to refer to that book from time to time as the Cox Treatise. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
You consider that treatise to be authoritative, do you not?
In the legal world, yes.
Well, would you own one as a planner, correct?
Yes.
And you're not a lawyer?
Correct.
And yet you refer to it frequently, do you not?
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that most planners do?
Yes.
All right.
Mr. Newmark, if I could just stop you for 1 second, I'd like to just put an objection on the record that the Cox Treatise is not a statute. It's not case law. It is just a treatise that is not authoritative in itself.
Well, Mr. Benson, I would correct you in that under the New Jersey Rules of Evidence, a treatise that is accepted as authoritative is an exception to the hearsay rule. I can read it into the record. I can address it at summation, and I can certainly question your witness with respect to it in as much as he's conceded that it is authoritative and that he uses it all the time. So
I have no problem with you using it. I just want to point out that what I said.
Well, I suspect that the board members and their professionals know that it's not a statute, know that it's not an ordinance. It's a treatise that everybody treats as authoritative. Now, in terms of the function of the board here, that information that's in that treatise can be informative to them, would you think?
I think the board, first of all, relies on the testimony of the hearing, and then where matters slide into legal issues, I presume the board relies on its attorney.
Okay. You suspect that the attorney from time to time uses that treatise?
I would suspect so, but you can ask Mr. Warner yourself.
No, I just was curious whether you suspect so. So you've answered that question. The board is obliged to follow, and what I'm going to say is NJSA 4055D at SEC, which we know as the municipal land use law, and which I'm going to refer to as the MLUL. The board has to follow that, do they not?
Yes.
And they are also obliged to follow the reported decisions of the New Jersey appellate courts that construe the MLUL. Would you agree with that?
In the legal realm, yes.
Now,
And I'm going to place very quickly an objection on the record that Mr. Steck is not a lawyer and cannot opine on legal issues.
Mr. Steck, do you read the reported decisions of the appellate courts of this state from time to time?
When they are given to me by an attorney who considers them relevant, I do occasionally review decisions.
You do not reach out and try to get a hold of new reported decisions as they come out to the extent that they address planning and zoning? You don't go out and look at those decisions?
No, I rely on the attorneys I work with.
Okay. Now, you do understand that the applicant in this case is asking the board to grant the necessary variances based on NJSA 4055D-70C1, which require a showing of hardship. You understand that, do you not?
I understand that the applicant is not applying under that provision.
That would have called for a yes answer to my question. You understand that the applicant is not asking the board to grant the necessary variances based upon NJSA 70C, NJSA 4055D-70C1, which requires a showing of hardship. You agree that that's not what we're asking?
Correct.
What the applicant is requesting the board to do is to approve variances pursuant to the authority found in NJSA 40:55D-70C2, correct?
Yes.
The MLUL was amended in, I believe, 1984. I could stand corrected on the date, to provide C2 as an alternative basis for a bulk or dimensional variance. Do you agree with that?
Well, since you can't verify the date, I'm not going to verify it either.
Well, there was a time when the legislature did amend the MLUL to provide C2 as an alternative basis for bulk or dimensional variances. You would agree with that?
In my direct testimony, I talked about the Kaufman case and how its facts are substantially different than this case.
Did I mention the Kaufman case in my question, Mr. Steck?
No, but I was trying to give you a complete answer.
Well, the question was, the MLUL was amended some time ago to provide C2 as an alternative basis for bulk or dimensional variances. The simple answer to that question is yes. Wouldn't that be correct?
That would be the simple answer, yes.
Thank you. Is the C2 variance sometimes referred to as the flexible C variance?
Yes.
Now, you have Cox, correct?
Yes.
You have it with you?
Which edition are you referring to?
2021.
I do have it with me.
Okay. Would you look at, and let me get mine out so we're all talking about the same thing. Would you look at page 642, please?
I have that in front of me.
Okay, and we're talking about chapter 29-3.2 purpose. And the author of the treatise states that the purpose of enacting C2 is to set forth in the set forth in the statement that accompanied the bill. And then it goes on to quote the statement at length, correct?
Yes.
Now, if you were to go to page 643, in the middle, the author states, and I'm going to paraphrase some, but as can be taken from the official statement, the clarification of the language of NJSA 4055D-7 that goes on to taken together with the restrictive interpretations of the courts under the former C, now paragraph C1.
I'm sorry,
am I going too fast, Mr. Steck?
I lost you where you were reading.
Okay, well, forgive me. Let me slow down and be a little more precise. Let me take a drink of water. Talk. Okay, so we're in the second paragraph on page 643.
I'm there.
You have it, okay. And that says, the author says, as can be seen from the official statement, the clarification of the language in NJS 4055D-70D to indicate that a variance for special reasons was not limited to allow a structure or use in a district restricted against such structure or use, taken together with the restrictive interpretations of the courts under former subsection C, now paragraph C1, led to the enactment of paragraph C2, and this is the important part, with the intent of liberalizing the powers of the planning boards and boards of adjustment in acting on C variance applications. Now that's what the author of the Cox Treatise said. Do you agree with that?
Well, that first of all, it's two authors. It's Jonathan Drill and Lisa John Basta. And I agree that that's what they wrote in their book.
Do you agree with what they said? We know they wrote it. Do you agree with what they said?
I agree that by adding the C2, it opened the door to other types of applications that might be eligible for a C variance if the statutory proofs are present.
Do you agree or disagree that the intent of the legislature was to liberalize the power of the land use boards when they act on C variances?
I would say it expanded the basis for giving C variances.
And you agree, do you not, that the variances sought in this case are all C variances, correct?
Correct.
Now, if we go down to the next paragraph on page 643, the authors, and I know both of them and high regard for both of them, they write the following: as stated by the court in Trinity Baptist v. Lewis Scott Hold, with the citation, quote, we recognize that the intent of the legislature in adopting NJSA 4055D-70C2 was to broaden the C variance by adding alternative criteria. You agree with that?
Objection. Mr. Newmark is making legal arguments. I'm not sure why he's asking our planner these legal questions.
I'm unfamiliar with an objection that says that I don't know what Mr. Newmark is asking. So may I proceed, Mr. Chairman?
No, that was not the objection. The objection was that you are asking a planner legal questions and you're trying to make a legal argument in the process.
Mr. Steck, do you think you're able to answer these questions?
Putting aside the issue of the relevancy, I already answered it. I said that the C2 amendment to the municipal land use law widened the bases that a planning board can use to grant a C variance.
Can we proceed? If you look at the next paragraph, it's headed 29-3-3, and you can read it or not read it, but I will tell you, and you can dispute it if you think you can, that the authors then set forth the 5 things that must be shown for relief under C2. And in that regard, application must, one, relate to a specific piece of property. Is that correct?
Yes,
And this,
that's what the authors say.
but do you disagree with that?
I agree with what the authors say, and yes, the variances sought must not be generic, but relate to a specific piece of property.
The C2 requires the purposes of the MLUL to be advanced by a deviation from the zoning ordinance requirements. You agree with that? Is one part of the proofs that are necessary.
Yes,
And the purposes of zoning are found in the MLUL, correct?
that's not in that section of the text, but that's correct.
I'm sorry, so I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Before you were reading from the text, you have now strayed from that, but I agree that the purposes are the same as the purposes in the municipal land use law.
And those purposes are found in the municipal land use law, NJSA 4055D-2. Now, I know you're not an attorney, but you would agree with what the statute designates as the purposes of zoning, and that they are found in NJSA 4055-2. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Now, you were present when Mr. Schomer testified.
Yes. Virtually.
I'm sorry?
Virtually.
Virtually, as we all are. And you heard his testimony, did you not?
Yes.
Now, he cited several of the subsections of NJ 4055D-2, correct?
Yes.
One of them was A, which is to encourage municipal action in the development of land such as will promote the general welfare. Did he not rely on that in giving his testimony?
He tried to rely on that, yes.
Yeah, and you, it was your position that you didn't agree with him and you felt that this application did not further that purpose, correct?
I think I testified that a single family home would advance that purpose on one lot.
That's not what I asked you. You disagreed with Mr. excuse me, Mr. Schomer's testimony with respect to subsection A in 4055D-2. You disagreed with it, did you not?
Yes.
You also disagreed with his testimony that the purpose of establishing appropriate population densities would be furthered in this application, and he testified to that and you disagreed with it, correct?
I disagreed with him because one of the variances is that you're exceeding the density in the zone. How can you be advancing appropriate population density when you're exceeding the density?
Mr. Steck, did I ask you to explain why you disagreed with him? All I ask is whether you disagreed with him, and that's a yes or no question.
Well, I'm trying to give you a complete answer.
Complete answer would be yes or no. So please confine yourself to yes or no when the question lends itself to that. Otherwise, we're going to be here longer than is necessary. You don't have to repeat the testimony you gave back in November.
Well, you're asking me questions that I already answered in November.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Be directed.
Newmark here, Mr. Newmark. Mr. Newmark.
Mr.
Benson. Steve Warner, Board Attorney. I'm going to advise the chair. This is argumentative, and Mr. Newmark, you can continue your line of questioning, but in fairness, the witness is allowed to provide an answer that he believes is a complete answer. Whether you agree or disagree with that, he's entitled to do that. And so please continue. My recommendation to the chair is to allow Mr. Newmark to continue his questioning and allow Mr. Steck to answer the questions as he deems fit and complete.
And I will respect and follow that to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Were you finished, Mr. Steck?
Yes.
Mr. Schomer also indicated that subsection G of the purposes of zoning, which is to provide sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of uses, including residential, that purpose was furthered by this application. And you disagreed with in that regard. Is that correct?
Yes.
He also addressed subsection I of the purposes of zoning, which is to promote a desirable visual environment through creative civic design. And when you testified, you disagreed with that, and you explained at length why you disagreed with it, correct?
Yes, I said by putting the building too close to the front property line and by positioning one of the houses so that it is twisted 90 degrees, in my opinion, were not aesthetic benefits, as well as tearing down trees in the front of the property by having a setback less than 100 feet. Those were negative aesthetic aspects of the application.
And I just drank some water that went down the wrong way. Excuse me. Now, it's the function of the board to decide which of you they find more persuasive. Would you agree with that?
Provided the testimony is credible testimony of each witness, the board has the ability to adopt the rationale of either me or Mr. Schomer, assuming that there's a valid foundation for that opinion.
A third aspect of the flexible C2 variance is that the variance can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good. Is that correct?
Yes.
And four, that the benefits of the deviation would substantially outweigh any detriment, correct?
Yes.
And with respect to the detriments that are contained in 3 and 4, based upon the evidence, those are value judgments that the board has to make based upon the evidence that has been presented, both pro and con. Would you agree with that?
Provided the evidence is credible, that's correct.
And ordinarily, it's up to the board to decide which is more credible or persuasive. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Finally, they have to decide whether the variance will substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and the zoning ordinance. That's the fifth aspect of C2. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Now, in this particular situation we have here is that the lots that are being proposed, the 2 lots out of 1, are the last developable parcels in the neighborhood. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
And you also agree that if the board were to approve the subdivision, it would not be setting a precedent. Would you agree with that?
There's never a precedent set in the land use business.
So I'm correct that in this case, if they were to grant the variances and allow the 2 lots to be developed, that would not result in a precedent for future cases. You agree with that, correct?
It would not automatically be support for another subdivision, but in my experience, oftentimes applicants refer to other what they believe similar subdivisions to support their case. So it's an argument that surfaces, but technically each application stands on its own because usually the facts are specific to that application.
And certainly anybody tries to cite it as precedent in another case someplace else, that he would correctly advise the board that the approval is not a precedent. It wouldn't result in a slippery slope or a domino effect. That would be the proper thing for the board attorney to tell the board, correct?
I can't opine on what the proper thing for the board's attorney to do is.
All right, Mr. Warner will tell us perhaps at some point. But I guess the bottom line is putting aside 1, 2, 3, and 4, when we get to 5, regarding whether it will substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and the zoning ordinance, in this particular case, on this particular street, at this particular location, would the granting of the variance to create 2 substandard lots substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance?
I didn't understand your question.
I'm sorry, I'll try it again. One of the things that needs to be decided by the board in this kind of a case, a C2 case, or a C1 case, or a D case, is whether the approval of the variance sought, in this case, 2 lots instead of 1, would substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance. You agree with that, do you not?
Yes.
And in this case, do you think that they could possibly come to the conclusion, given the facts of this case, that the granting of the variances and approving the 2 lots would substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance?
Yes, in my opinion, granting this application would substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and the zoning ordinance.
And how would it do that?
Well, first of all, the master plan sets a minimum density of 3 acres for 1 lot. This plan violates that principle. It has a higher density than the master plan recommended. The master plan supported the current zoning of the property, and 7 variances are needed to accommodate this proposed subdivision. It is a highly contorted subdivision that produces strained building envelopes that, in my opinion, are substantially detrimental to what the intent is of both the zoning ordinance and the master plan.
But would the granting of the relief somehow actually, never mind that it's inconsistent in your view with the master plan or the ordinance, certainly if it was consistent with the ordinance, we would not need variances. So we need a variance, and therefore it's inconsistent with the ordinance. The question is whether by granting the ordinance, somehow the zoning ordinance would be impaired. And you're saying that it would be?
Yes.
Okay.
Substantially.
Okay. Now, did you review the April 22nd, 2019 TCC report?
At one time I did.
And if you don't have it handy, that's okay. If you do have it handy, you might want to take a look at it. If you don't, that's okay. I can read it short, I'll read it to you. Shall I?
I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, I will read it to you, the pertinent part of it. And we're talking about the TCC.
I'm going to object. If you're going to ask him about it, you need to show it to him.
Well, that's a little difficult.
Would you tell me what the date of the report is, please?
April 18th, 2019.
22.
Mr. Chairman, for clarification, the date of the TCC meeting was April 18, 2019. The date of the report is April 22, 2019. Is that correct, Mr. Newmar?
That is correct. I stand corrected.
I've retrieved the April 22, 2019 TCC report.
Thank you, Mr. Stuck. I appreciate that. And in paragraph 2, and I'll read it for those who don't have it in front of them, it says the following. The TCC noted that given the location of the wetlands in the rear portion of the property, the relief from the front yard setback requirement seemed reasonable, however, the TCC advised the applicant that the existence of wetlands did not provide a basis for the lot area variance, period. As a result, the TCC encouraged the applicant to provide documentation to the board of existing lot sizes in the immediate neighborhood and principally along Edward Shippen Lane to support the lot area variance request. Did I read it correctly?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm more concerned about the beginning of it, which says that the TCC addressed the front yard setback, which we're proposing is only 75 feet, whereas the ordinance requires 100 feet. The TCC noted that given the location of the wetlands in the rear portion of the property, relief from the front yard setback requirement seemed reasonable. Did I read it correctly?
You read it correctly. So
my question is only, did I read it correctly? We'll get to the next question.
I'm sorry, he is allowed to finish his answer.
You read it correctly, and as I understand it, the TCC at that time, without having any evidence before it, said that the front setback variance might be reasonable, but it said that, again, with no evidence before it, the subdivision into two substandard lots didn't seem as reasonable.
So you disagree with that conclusion?
It says what it is, but the answer is that was before the hearing started, and the board must act on hearing that evidence that's presented at a hearing, not what the recommendation is before the hearing even started.
My question to you, sir, is do you agree or disagree with the TCC report or the portion of it that I just read?
I agree that you read it correctly, but it is irrelevant because evidence had not yet been presented.
And the relevance would be for the board to decide. Would that not be correct?
The relevance is it's the burden of the applicant to provide the evidence. And if it's inadequate, the board, it doesn't warrant an approval by this board.
I take it that you, as far as you're concerned, and you so testified, that the granting that variance 100 feet to 75 feet is not justified.
Correct.
And you concluded, did you not, that it would cause substantial detriment to the public good? Did you not think so?
Yes.
All right, we'll come back to that in a little while. Now, regarding the lot size variance, the lot as it's presently constituted is 5.6 decimal points acre size, correct?
Yes.
And each of the two lots that are proposed 2.81 acres in size, is that correct?
2.81 acres, yes, for each lot.
Okay, and so it is deficient by 6.3%, correct?
Each lot is deficient by 6.3%. That's correct.
Now, are you familiar with the information supplied by Mr. Koff regarding lot sizes and what he considers the neighborhood contained in the declaration of Paul Koff dated December 7, 2020?
I'm aware of the document, but I did not rely upon it in formulating my opinion.
I didn't ask you that. I just asked you whether you're familiar with it.
I did review it.
Okay. Now, I sent an email to Ryan Benson earlier today. I don't know if he received it, and I don't know whether he passed it on to you with respect to that document. Mr. Benson, may I ask you, did you receive it and send it on to Mr. Steck?
I did receive the email, and I did call Mr. Steck's attention to the document that you referenced.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that cooperation. In that appendix, Mr. Koff lists 11 improved properties in what he used as the neighborhood and provided the lot sizes for each property. Is that correct?
That's what he included on 2 pages in his attachment or appendix B, correct?
Okay, all right. And the total lot areas for those 11 improved lots comes out to 35.5 acres or an average lot size of 3.2 acres. Is my math correct?
Your math is correct.
That's a surprise, frankly. If the board approves this subdivision, the total lot areas for the 13 lots, that would be the 11 existing improved lots and the 2 additional lots we propose, that would equal 41.1 acres, correct?
Yes, mathematically.
Thank you. And if you divide 13 lots into 41.1 acres, total lot area, the average neighborhood lot area would be 3.16 acres. Do you agree with that?
Your arithmetic is correct, although it has nothing to do with the merits of the variance.
Thank you for that editorialization.
You're welcome.
Isn't the average lot size consistent with what the framers of the ordinance intended regarding overall 3-acre density within the neighborhood?
No, the ordinance establishes a minimum lot size. It does not establish a regulation based on average.
Now, if this subdivision were to be denied, the single lot of 5 acres would be 2.6 acres larger than the neighborhood average. Would you?
Yes, with most of that in wetlands that can't be built upon.
Well, is there something in the ordinance that addresses land that you can build upon and land that you can't build upon?
There's something in the state DEP regulations that prohibits development of wetlands or within wetland transition areas.
My question was, is there anything in the Morris Township ordinance that says that because a particular area is unbuildable, it should be eliminated from calculations? Is there anything in the Morris Township zoning ordinance that says anything like that?
Yes, there's something that says something like that.
And what is that?
In the subdivision ordinance, in section 57-84 with the heading of lots, subparagraph E reads as follows: where there is a question of the suitability of a lot or lots for their intended use due to factors such as rock formations, flood conditions, high water table, sewage disposal, excessive topographic slope, or similar circumstances, the planning board may, after adequate investigation with professional assistance, if deemed necessary, withhold approval of such lots.
And aside from your testimony, have you seen anything submitted to the planning board by its professionals that would fit into that limitation?
Well, the professionals have been have prepared memos, and I would assume that when the hearing is closed, they will have the opportunity to assist the board in decision making.
And with respect to the extent to which wetlands would impact this property, that's solely within the exclusive jurisdiction of the DEP, isn't that correct?
The specific delineation of wetlands is within the jurisdiction of DEP, but consideration of variances, in my opinion, it is legitimate to consider the extent of wetlands on a property.
Now, the wetlands on these properties, which have been shown on exhibits that were submitted by Mr. Schomer, you, of course, agree with that those delineations. You didn't have an issue with that, did you?
I believe the applicant at one time got an LOI, so that's the official determination. One of them is an ordinary wetlands, and the other two are extraordinary with normally 150-foot transition areas.
And those areas were accurately shown on an exhibit that was submitted to the board by Mr. Schomer. Is that not correct?
Well, you'll have to ask Mr. Schomer, but I would suspect that they're probably accurate.
Would you have any reason to think that they aren't?
I don't have any reason, but only Mr. Schomer can tell you how accurate his drawings are.
Well, what would you have to have done in order to determine whether they were accurate?
I would simply look at the DEP records.
And those records were produced by Mr. Cuff, were they not?
Yes.
So you could have looked at those records and done your analysis and told
I would, again, if I believe I relied on the data, the information that was supplied by Mr. Schomer, who did show the delineation of the wetlands. What is not resolved at the moment, because it's clear from the past that the applicant could not develop even one house on the lot without a hardship request to DEP. The applicant has shown a reduced buffer area, which is under the decision of DEP whether or not to grant that. So while the location of wetlands and the automatic 150-foot transition area are in fact there, we don't know whether DEP would grant a hardship waiver for two houses rather than just one.
And you agree, do you not, that you are not in a position to tell this board that the exhibit created by Mr. Schomer is erroneous, correct?
It's not erroneous, other than it presumes that DEP is going to allow reduction of the transition area. We don't know that that's a case yet.
And Mr. Steck, on how many occasions in these hearings has the board been told by Mr. Schomer or myself that their approval of this application will not result in the development of the two properties unless and until the DEP makes a determination with respect to relief from the wetlands regulations?
I don't know how many times.
We said that many times.
I've heard it more than once.
I'm sorry?
I've heard it more than once.
Okay, so we all know that the planning board's conduct in this case is totally separate and apart from the DEP. The planning board's function is to decide whether the subdivision should be granted, and in order to do that, they will have to decide whether the variances requested are warranted. They don't get into the wetlands, and nor does the DEP get into the zoning ordinance requirements. They each have their own time and their own function. Is that correct?
Well, they each have their own jurisdiction, but in my opinion, the presence of wetlands is a factor that the planning board can take into consideration. And there are instances in the municipal land use law where the law says if it's so crucial, the board can request the applicant to secure an DEP approval in advance of the subdivision. There are exceptions to the law which allows the board to do other than simply make its own decisions subject to DEP.
Well, the board could approve this application, and one of its conditions would be the relief from the DEP that's being requested, correct?
That's one route, but in my opinion, it is such a focal point that I think the board is within its rights to say, get your answer from DEP first before we rule on this.
Can you cite me some authority for that proposition?
Yes, from the municipal land use law. I think it uses the phrase in appropriate circumstances, and I'll see if I can pull it out quickly. I believe it's section 22. Oh, okay. This is 4055D-22 conditional approvals. Let's see. Oh, and it's subparagraph B. In the event that development proposed by an application for development requires an approval by a government agency other than the municipal agency shall, in appropriate instances, condition its approval upon the subsequent approval of such governmental agency, provided that the municipality shall make a decision on any application or development within the time period, et cetera. So this allows the board to say, so what I'm saying is it's not automatic that you make every decision subject to DEP approval. There are instances where it's so fundamental that the board can direct the applicant to secure that outside approval.
And you find that in 22?
Yes.
Could you read it again? Because I see in 22, which is exactly what I said, is that the board can impose a condition that the approval is conditioned upon the subsequent approval of another agency. That's what
it uses the phrase in appropriate instances. And in my opinion, that gives the board the discretion to say, this is not an appropriate instance.
And they could then turn it down on that basis?
They can say, you should get DEP approval first because it is so fundamental to the nature of this application.
That's a position you're taking that comes out of section 22, or are you suggesting it comes from some other section?
First of all, I'm saying that absent DEP, the applicant has not provided substantial credible evidence that can approve the application. But what I'm countering is you keep on saying that, oh, don't worry about this, we have to go to DEP anyway. And my point is that it's not automatic that you have to wait. You have to make a local decision before DEP renders a decision. There are some instances that can be accommodated by the municipal land use law where that outside agency information is so fundamental that the board deserves an answer in advance of its own decision.
Well, let me see if we can get some light shed on this. Section 22B, which you quoted from, you didn't quote the whole thing because on the fourth line down, it says, provided that the municipality shall make a decision on any application for development within the time period provided in this act or within an extension of such period as has been agreed to by the applicant, unless the municipal agency is prevented or relieved from so acting by operation of law. Did I read it correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Let's leave that and go on to the homes that are along Edgewood Lane, including the two that are corner lots. There was placed in the record, I think I did, and I think maybe Mr. Schomer did, and I think Mr. Kof also did, that there are 5 houses and 6 Jonathan Smith is 4,030 square feet. 3 Edward Shippen Lane is 8,479 square feet. 4 Jonathan Smith Road is 3,584 square feet. 6 Edward Shippen Lane is 7,513 square feet. And 4 Edward Shippen Lane is 4,468 square feet. Do you disagree with those numbers?
I did not do an independent verification of those numbers.
Would you accept them as accurate?
I don't think they're that relevant. My analysis was driving and walking the street and looking at aerial photographs, and that was sufficient for me to render my judgment.
Do you accept those square footage indications with respect to each of those 5 lots as accurate?
I have not verified them, but and again, one of the problems is that assessors treat sometimes basements differently depending upon they were heated or not heated space. So I believe those numbers came from assessment records, which is not always what you see visually on a property. And I consider it of diminished importance. There are large houses, large, elegant estate type houses on the street. And I did a visual analysis and an aerial analysis that was sufficient for my purposes.
Mr. Dorn testified that one of the homes that were proposed for one of the lots would be 7,196 square feet, and the other would be 5,970 square feet. Would the size of those lots be compatible or incompatible with the size of lots on the remaining 5 lots?
You said the size of the lots, and these lots are smaller than any of the lots on the street.
Well, so the one that would be 7,196 square feet, would that be incompatible with the sizes of the homes on the street, the 5 homes that I quoted?
I think you misstated things, because when you asked me the question, you talked about lots rather than building sizes. Let
me restate it. I'm sorry, I may have misspoken, Peter, and let me be clear. I recited 6 home square footages for the, 5 for the 5 properties, including the 2 on the corner. And I gave you information that you suggest comes from the assessor, and you suggested it may be off to some degree. So we can't agree on that, okay? What I'm asking you is, if Peter Dorn's testimony was accurate, assume that one of the houses he testified would be 7,196 square feet. My question to you is, with respect to the size of that house and the sizes of the other homes on the street, would that house size-wise be incompatible with the existing homes?
The ordinance doesn't really regulate the size of homes. What is most troublesome to me is not the square footage of the homes, but one of the homes is being forced to be turned 90 degrees, which is clearly not characteristic of the neighborhood. And by the way, my neighborhood is much larger than the neighborhood looked at by Mr. Schomer or Mr. Cole. That's on, I believe, I think it was 019 of my exhibit.
Finished with your answer?
Yep.
Now, the home on the proposed lot closest to Mr. Kopp, which is 40.01.
41.
Correct about that?
41.
41.01, forgive me, is set back from the common line dividing Mr. Kopp's home with the proposed new lot 41.01 by 50 feet. Do you agree with that?
The home, the wall of the home, excluding the deck and the retaining walls, is 50 feet away from the common property line.
And the ordinance in this R130 zone district fits that structure to be 50 feet from the common boundary line, correct?
Yes.
And I think there was a discrepancy and a disagreement with respect to the location of Mr. Koch's home in relation to that common line. I think we thought it was 91 feet. You had a different, you calculated it differently. What did you come?
Initially, I think the problem is that Mr. Schomer scaled it probably from a NJDEP GeoWeb map. I looked at a survey, and that dwelling is 76.68 feet from its side property line.
Okay,
so it's substantially closer than what Mr. Schomer estimated.
We apologize for that inaccuracy. I'm sure you would agree that it was inadvertent, correct?
I don't know.
76.7 or 77.6, which did you say?
76.68.
Okay, can we, let's use 76. So 76 and 50 is 100, have to help me with this one, 126?
Approximately.
Okay. So the two houses would be 126 feet apart. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
The ordinance calls for a minimum of 100 feet separation between homes that would be constructed on these lots, correct?
Yes.
And this distance between Mr. Koch's home and Mr. excuse me, and the applicant's new lot, the house on that lot, as shown on the exhibits, would be 26 feet further away than would be permitted by the ordinance, correct?
Yes.
And is it your position that Mr. Koff has a legitimate zoning objection to that distance?
I can't comment on his personal opinion. My opinion is looking at this subdivision that involves 7 variances and forcing a house to be turned 90 degrees does not warrant approval.
So you can't answer that Mr. Koff would have a legitimate zoning objection to this?
I think he has an objection to an application where the variances are not justified. And that's, and the answer is it's not, I know you like to pick apart each variance on its own, but the answer is this is an application that involves 7 variances. It's the composite of having 2 houses on that lot that I believe is offensive.
The home across the street from 41.01, would you agree that it's approximately 200 feet away from Mr. Stein's house?
Well, first of all, the Stein setback is 100 feet. But would you ask that again? I'm not sure I understood the question.
What I'm asking you is whether you agree that Mr. Stein's house would be over 200 feet away from the house that is proposed to be erected on 41.01.
Yes.
And it would be over 400 feet away from the house that's next to Mr. Stein's house. I don't recall the lot number or the address, but that house that's adjacent to Mr. Stein's house would be more than 400 feet away from the house proposed on 41.01. Would you agree with that?
I haven't scaled it, so I don't know for sure, but it may likely be over 400 feet away.
Okay. Now, I gather that what you're telling the board is that if they approve the requested subdivision, which will add one more home to what otherwise would be a 12-lot neighborhood, the result will be an increase in density in the affected neighborhood that will have a substantial negative impact on the general welfare of the homeowners in the affected neighborhood. Is that what you're telling this board?
I'm telling the board that this is a subdivision that is obviously gerrymandered. It has substantial environmental sensitivity, and that the applicant has not demonstrated substantial credible evidence that would allow the board to approve this subdivision. And part of that is the fact that, in my opinion, granting this under insubstantial reasons would substantially impair the intent and purpose of the master plan and the zoning ordinance, and would result in substantial detriment to the public good.
So you are telling the board that if they approve the requested subdivision, which will add only one more home to the 12-lot neighborhood, that would result in an increase in density in the affected neighborhood that will have a substantial negative impact on those homeowners.
The ordinance does not look at neighborhood density. It recommends one house on every 3 acres. So in terms of density, you're producing 2 lots that are over the limit in density, with not having any substantial reason for granting that variance, and acknowledging the substantial environmental sensitivity of the property, in my opinion, results in substantial detriment.
But as you say, that's your opinion.
That's the only thing I'm given tonight.
Let me ask you this. We've talked about impact on homes and the neighborhood. Leaving Mr. Stein and leaving Mr. Kof out of the equation, are you telling this board that the homes located at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, let me see if I've got the right numbers here. The other 11 homes that are among those homes referred to by Mr. Kof, his appendix, which we talked about before, other than Mr. Stein and Mr. Kof, are you telling this board that the other properties that go up Edward Shippen Lane and go right and left on Jonathan Smith, those 11 homes are going to be negatively affected by the approval of this 2-lot subdivision at the end of Edward Shippen Lane?
First of all, I did not rely on the information, the 11 homes that Mr. Kof cited in his declaration. That was not part of my study, not part of my analysis. In my opinion, there may be a home further away from this. First of all, my analysis was as a much larger area to show that the vast majority of homes in this zone are conforming in terms of lot area. In my opinion, one of the proofs is whether this would result in substantial impairment of the zone plan, meaning the master plan in the zoning ordinance. And in my opinion, they will, independent of any impact on any individual home.
So I understand that you a little while ago, you said in your opinion, the approval of this application would substantially impair the intent and purpose of the ordinance and the master plan. You said that 20 minutes ago, am I right?
Yes, and I'll say it again if you ask me the same question.
No, but I'm not asking you that question. What I'm asking you is not with respect to its impact on the zone scheme or the zoning ordinance or the master plan. I'm asking you, and again, you may not have testified to these particular homes, but I'm asking you, since you're familiar with the neighborhood, you're familiar with the property and the surrounding neighborhood, I'm asking you if you are telling this board, in your opinion, the approval of this application would have a negative impact. And for this conversation, I'm going to say, would it have a negative impact on the 2 corner lots and the 2 lots adjacent to those corner lots? Would those lots be substantially negatively impacted if this board were to grant that variance?
In my opinion, by granting variances with insubstantial basis, you threaten the integrity of the zone. And as a result, there is substantial impairment.
I'm asking you whether the properties at the corner of Edward Shippen and Jonathan Smith be negatively impacted in some way if this board were to allow this property to be developed with 2 homes rather than 1. Can you answer,
in my opinion,
because can you answer that question?
Because these homes are in the same zone, to grant a variance based on insubstantial reasons, in my opinion, threatens the integrity of the zone.
Well, I'm not asking you about the integrity of the zone. You keep going back to the integrity.
But that's what the land use law calls for. You asking me about property values?
Does it not address the public welfare? And does that include the owners of the properties within the immediate area?
My area of analysis, again, is much larger, and I've given my opinion. Are you asking me whether it's going to affect the value of them? I can't opine on that. I'm not an appraiser. I'm saying that granting a subdivision that is so contorted and ignores the environmental sensitivity of the lot threatens the integrity of the zone.
You're finished, I take it. So let's move on. I think I recall that you testified that you agreed that if the applicant was limited to 1 home on the 5.6 acre tract, that home could be located in approximately the same location as the home presently proposed at 41.01. Is that correct?
It could legally be placed in that location without a variance. Well, except that the home you show needs a variance because it's only 76 feet back and it should be 100 feet back. But there is enough room to place a home that's 50 feet from my client's property line. It's just that if this were 1 lot, I don't know why someone would shoot themselves in the foot by positioning a home that's turned 90 degrees in that fashion.
It could be done because, among other things, nobody, the planning board, the building inspector, the zoning officer, no one would be able to control the location of that home. So I think you've agreed that it could be done. Somebody could build a house that basic configuration, 100 feet back from the street, 50 feet back from the common property line, that could be done, correct?
It could be done provided NJDEP grants a hardship waiver.
We understand, that's a given, all right? We understand it, okay? So if that is so, would it be your opinion that the home that would be built at that location would have a substantial negative impact on Mr. Koff's property?
If it's conforming by definition, it would not have a negative impact. He could build a glowing purple house that flashes at night, and that would have a detrimental impact, but we probably couldn't stop it.
Now,
but if it conforms to the ordinance, it's irrelevant whether Mr. Koff likes it or doesn't like it. If the applicant is within the bounds of the ordinance, he has no basis to object.
Nor would Mr. Stein, correct?
Again, whether they object or not is different. If the applicant has a variance-free application, and this one involves 7 variances, whether they object or not is irrelevant because the applicant can simply get a building permit.
That being so, with respect to the negative impact the proposed subdivision would result in, according to you, in doing its C2 analysis, the board would address it really. So really, well, let me restate that because I'm not stating it well. If what you say is true with respect to the permitted development of the 5.6 acres, with respect to negative impact, not the positive requirements, but the negative impact, it would be important for the board to consider in doing its C2 analysis, the real issue relates to the proposed 13th home in the neighborhood on proposed lot 41. Isn't that correct? Isn't that what this case is really all about, the second home?
No, this case is about the improper, unjustified subdivision of one lot into 2 lots.
But part of the board's function is to analyze the negative impact resulting from the.
There is no negative.
Let me finish, please. That results from the approval that we're seeking. They have to decide whether any harm is going to come to the neighborhood as a result of what's being proposed. And since you've already acknowledged the owner of the property could put one house essentially very close to where the one house would be if the subdivision were approved in relation to next door to Mr. Koff, isn't the real issue that the board has to grapple with whether the second home, lot 41, is worthy of relief? Isn't that
no.
Really about?
The reason there is a contorted design placement of the closest home is that you are subdividing the lot and severely limiting the area where a house can be built. If this were not subdivided, there would be a building envelope of maybe 14,000 square feet, a lot of places to put a house. Why would someone put a house 50 feet away, facing its rear yard, facing an adjacent house? Why would someone do that when they had that flexibility of having a decent rear yard and a decent house on 14,000 square feet of buildable area?
But if the Weisgerbers should sell this property to somebody, that somebody could do anything that they wanted to do as long as it didn't offend the ordinance. Whereas the application contains limitations so that everybody will know exactly what is going to end up on this 5.6 acre tract going forward. And you don't think that's.
You cut off, but I think I can answer. I think that the assurance of the architecture is immaterial in terms of the merits of this application.
But we'll get to that a little later. Mr. Stagg, do you have the ability to put your exhibit 020 up on the screen? And I think I'm calling out the correct one, I hope.
let me see if I can do that.
Thank you.
Let's see.
How am I doing?
Let's see here.
What is it that's blocking me on the screen? What is that? That line or, oh, it's mine. Are you able to do that, Mr. Stack?
Given a few more minutes, I think the answer is going to be yes.
Thank you.
Now let's see here. Let's see here.
Leave it. No, what happened? Oh, he's still okay.
We're coming closer.
Okay. I hope it's the right one. I think it is.
Let's see. Okay, we're getting better here, I think.
That's not the one I'm looking for.
Well, I'm going to page down.
I see. Okay. All right.
Let's see if I can put this here. And what's the exhibit you want? 8?
Well, it's the one I'm looking at the bottom left of the screen right now. It shows it's an aerial view of the general area.
Such as this one?
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so it's slide 5.
Well, this is, I think this was marked as.
No, this is not.
You want the one with the distances between buildings?
Yes.
That's in a different file. Let me try one more time.
There we go.
Okay, sorry for the difficulties.
No, it's all right.
Before you proceed, we're going to need an exhibit number.
I believe this was given the exhibit number of 021.
I won't disagree with you, although I somehow had the idea it was 020, but one of those two. But Mr. Steck.
Excuse me, Mr. Newmark, we have a board administrator here. Sonia, is that 020 or 021 or what is that?
What's the name of that?
Pardon me?
What's the name of that exhibit?
This is called analysis of dwelling separation distances. And what happened was this was not in my series of slides. It was a separate exhibit. And I believe as I was marching through my exhibits, I hit 020 and then we switched to this outside exhibit, which I recall being 021.
Can anybody confirm that for us? Because we're going to have to keep an accurate record. There's a lot of documents and we don't want to proceed with guesses.
I have down that 020 was NJDEP 2015 aerial photo with conforming housing superimposed.
This is 021, he's saying.
021 arrow showing distances between houses.
We all good?
Is that
Sonia, is that
2015?
021?
Is that 2015?
The date on this is September 20th, 2021. Oh, yeah, but the aerial photo is, I believe, a 2020 infrared satellite photo.
2020,
Yeah, it's at the bottom of the exhibit.
in fluorescent color, right?
Yes.
That's 021.
021?
Mhm.
All right, our board secretary says it's 021. We're going to go with 021. Please proceed with the chairman's permission.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, thank you. All right, thank you, Peter. Okay, so what you did was you took a DEP aerial, correct? And you superimposed upon it the location of the proposed homes on the two proposed lots, essentially as set forth in drawings that were created by Mr. Schomer, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you created arrows and dimensions. And so we're seeing that that the looking at Mr. Koff's property, can you use a pointer? Do you have the ability to do a pointer? Because I don't.
Can you see the pointer?
Yeah, okay. So put the pointer if you don't mind. Thank you, Peter. Put the pointer in Mr. Schoff's property.
Mr. Koff's property right here.
Correct. Okay. So that's Mr. Schoff. If you leave it there for a minute, that's Mr. Schoff's property, and his property, his house. And my site is not as good as I'd like it to be, but it looks like it says 135 feet from the road.
Yes.
And it says that it is 120. I can't read that, Peter. Can you tell me it's 120 what?
From which direction do you want to go from
The
there?
distance between Mr. Koff's house and and the 4101 home.
Oh, I had the distance between houses as 132 feet. That was scaled, but I have since, as I testified earlier, viewed a Mr. Koff's survey. So I now have a precise measurement of his side yard.
Which you said was 126 plus or minus, correct?
If you add the two together, that's correct.
Okay. And you show that the proposed setback of the house on 41.01 is 77 feet, correct?
Yes.
And the proposed setback on the house on lot 40 is 75 feet, correct?
Yes.
And the separation between the two proposed homes is 100 and again, my
109.
109 feet. One is 50 feet and one is 59 feet.
I believe, yes, from Mr. Schomer's plan.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yes, from Mr. Schomer's plan.
Right, and that 50 feet plus the 59 feet is consistent with what the ordinance calls for.
Yes.
All right, now you mentioned 7 variances. 2 of them are shown on this diagram. The 77-foot setback for the house on 4101 and the 75-foot setback on 41, correct?
Yes.
Now, would anybody, well, let me say anybody, would the deficiency of 23 feet and 25 feet with respect to the setbacks have any impact on Mr. Koff, the property that's designated as Ricciardi, or anybody on down that side of Edward Lane and up on Jonathan Smith? Would the deficiencies in setback have some kind of impact on those properties?
Yes.
And what would that impact be?
The houses would appear to be out of character with the neighborhood.
So the people who live around the corner, on what occasion would they even see those 2 houses with those 2 setbacks?
Well, I believe that people that live in the area have the legal right to walk their dogs, ride their bikes, to walk on the street and to drive on the street. And someone walking in the area, in my opinion, would see these new houses closer to the street than the other houses.
You believe that someone walking their dog down Edward Shippen Lane towards the cul-de-sac, as they pass Mr. Wallace's house and they see a house that's 105 feet back, and they pass Mr. Stein's house and they see a house that's 100 foot back, and then they pass a house that's 77 feet back, and one that is 75 foot back, and they would be able to discern the difference, and it would be troublesome to them. Is that what you're saying?
It would be the composite of two houses that are closer together than any other houses in the neighborhood.
But
And
in terms of closer together, they meet the ordinance requirements with respect to the distance.
I am talking about the fact that there only can be placed 109 feet apart because there is a subdivision that is unjustified. Without this subdivision, there could be one large house presented, positioned similarly to Mr. Stein's house, and no one would know that any variances, 7 variances were granted.
Well, let's talk about the 7 variances, and we've talked about 2 of them. You think the setback variances that are shown on the drawings, 23 feet and 25 feet, those setback variances that in April of 2019, the planning board suggested might be reasonable.
No, the planning board didn't rule on that. That was the technical coordinating committee, and that was prior to this hearing in my testimony.
I stand corrected. If I said the planning board, I meant the TCC. And in April of 2019, for better or worse, they suggested that these 2 variances were not unreasonable. So let's pass those 2, but that's 2 out of the 7. An additional 2 out of the 7 involve the separation of the 2 lots, each of which would be 2.81 acre in size, which is 6.3% smaller than they ought to be if you were to strictly use the ordinance requirements. So those are 2 additional variances for a deficiency of a little more than 6% of each lot. You end up with 2.8 acres on one lot and 2.8 acres on the other lot. So those are 4 of the variances, correct?
Yes.
Now, the other 3 variances involve the lot width at the street, and that there's a deficiency on which of those 2 lots?
41.01, the lot closest to the Cove property.
Would you use your cursor and go along that frontage so that the board knows what you're pointing at? Okay, so that frontage is deficient because it should be 300 feet, and I think it's only 270. Rusty, help me with that one.
That one is conforming at 350.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Lot 41.01 is conforming at 350. It's 41.
The other one. I'm sorry. So it's the
substandard 40, one is
40. I'm sorry, Peter. 41.
Yeah, excuse me. 40 is the substandard one, I believe.
Thank you. I stand corrected. So, and that distance, do you know that, Peter, or do I need?
It's on the plans, and let me.
262.
It's 262 feet instead of 300.
Yes, that's short by, I guess, 38 feet.
Okay. And putting aside that it would require a variance, it's inconsistent with the ordinance. Putting that aside, in what way would that have a negative impact on anybody?
Because it is part of the composite that results in this gerrymandered subdivision that allows 2 houses to be built on a lot that really should only have 1 house.
And who is offended by that, other than the ordinance and planners and people who think on those terms? Any people who live there or walk their dogs there, are they going to be impacted by that 30-foot deficiency?
The municipal land use law does not based on the individual opinion of dog walkers. It has to do with whether it impairs the zone plan and the zoning ordinance. And in my opinion, this does. And if everybody somehow loved this, you still have the burden as the applicant of showing that the statutory proofs are present, and I don't believe they've been demonstrated.
But part of the statutory proofs are to show that it will not substantially impair the public good.
Yes.
That's different than impair the ordinance or the zoning scheme.
That's correct. And that's why a house turned 90 degrees is uncharacteristic of the area. That's why houses that close together is uncharacteristic of the area. That's why the houses substantially less than 100 feet back are uncharacteristic of the area. And that's why lot 40.01 is, once you get back 100 feet and 140 feet, it's even more substandard that was in your initial recognized in your initial application.
All right, so we've talked about the two front yard setback variances. We've talked about the two lot area variances, and we've talked about one of the frontage variances. So that leaves us with two variances, correct?
Yes.
That we haven't talked about. And one of those is the lot width, which is supposed to be 300 feet at the front, 300 feet at the front setback line, and 40
at the required front setback line.
At the required front setback line, which is 100 feet, and 40 feet beyond that 100 feet. Am I right about that?
Actually, it's that whole space between 100 feet and 40 feet behind that. That's supposed to comply with the width, that whole space.
Okay, but those are the areas that we're talking about. And we're down to two. And one of them is a deficiency with respect to the width of the property on lot 41, help me, 41.01. And that is less than 300 feet, correct?
Yes.
Now, the applicant needs to get every one of these 7 variances. We've got to be something that no baseball player has ever done, I think. We have to go 7 for 7 in order to get this approval. Would you agree with that?
You have to justify the variances that you need.
Right, we have to get with the board has to agree with us that we're entitled to 7 out of 7.
Well, the board has to listen to the testimony and decide whether the applicant met its burden of proof.
With respect to each of these 7 variances.
Yes.
And if they agreed with us on 6 of them and not the 7th, they would have to deny the application, wouldn't
they? Yes.
Okay, I thought so. I just want to make sure I'm right about that. So any one of these variances, if not acceptable to the board, knocks us right out of the box.
Well, unless the answer is I reviewed this application. If you want to change it in some way, that's another application. But you've asked for 7 variances, and in my opinion, they have to be justified.
Right, you and I agree with that.
Then I don't understand the question.
Well, my question you answered was we have to get all 7 variances, right?
That's what you're requesting.
Right. Okay. So if we're asking for on 4101, we're asking for a variance to permit the home to be set back 77 feet instead of 100, correct?
Yes.
And the TCC said that may be reasonable, and the board might agree with them, correct?
Well, they didn't say that the board. Well, the answer, I'll repeat it again. That that paragraph that we talked about earlier said that without any testimony and not even the start of the hearing, the front yard setback might be reasonable. And then they said, we don't know if there's enough evidence to allow variances for 2 substandard lot sizes. So without granting the variances for 2 substandard lot sizes, there's no reason to give a frontage variance. That's kind of the parent issue. You're producing 2 lots that are each substandard in size, ignoring that there are wetlands on the property. And if that one variance isn't granted, the whole thing goes down the tubes.
Let me ask you this, as an expert, is it appropriate or am I entitled to ask you a hypothetical question?
Well, you can ask an attorney, but I think the attorney would say yes.
Okay. You've been asked many hypothetical questions in your career, have you not?
32.
32 years or 32?
No, 32 questions, if I recall correctly. So,
okay.
Sorry.
Well, let's assume, indulge me for a minute, Peter, and let's assume the board to agree with us that the variance for the setback of 77 feet at lot 4101, they're willing to approve it. Okay, can we assume that for these questions that I'm going to follow up with?
But not grant the lot area variances? I don't understand.
We're doing one at a time here. I'm just
But see, that's what you can't do. You have to, in my opinion, you have to look at this application as a composite. And if you don't justify just the higher density than permitted, then in my opinion, you can easily put a large house on this property that would reflect the position, for example, of the Stein house across the street.
And that proves that we don't have a hardship, that we haven't asked for a hardship variance, correct?
Correct.
But so you're unwilling to assume, hypothetically, just to indulge me.
I will indulge you.
That the board decided to do them one at a time, and they decided that the 77-foot setback was reasonable and that they were prepared to grant that variance. Can we assume that for these questions?
Sure.
Okay. If that were the case, and they had to then decide whether a lot width variance was justified, do you think that they, in that hypothetical setting, should look at the lot width at 77 feet or at 100 feet?
You cannot, in my opinion, isolate that. The lot 41.01 is highly contorted. It produces a triangular shaped building envelope that forces a house to be positioned in an uncharacteristic fashion. So, and that's related to the front setback. If of 100 feet, if the board said it's fine, put it 25 feet back from the street, you would have greater flexibility in positioning that house. But in my opinion, you can ask me the question about each variance isolated, but that, in my opinion, is not the proper way to analyze this application.
Okay. Now let's talk about the gerrymandering which you have suggested is involved in this case.
I'm sorry. Mr. Newmark, you're gonna have to take I don't know why that's fine. One of our board members had to step out, so we're going to have to wait.
Should I stop sharing my screen?
Well, it's okay to share the screen, but we just have to wait. There can't be
Okay.
any more testimony. I mean, it's the same screen. It's the same screen that was up already, correct?
Yes.
Okay. We just had a board member walk out of the room. We can't continue until all the board members are here.
That's fine. And this I still would like up there for the time being.
And Mr. Newmark, do you have an estimate how much longer your questioning will take? We need to, we have some business to conduct. I'm thinking we should conclude this evening at 10:15 so that we can do our board business.
Mr. Chairman, I did not hear the entirety of what you just said.
Mr. Newmark, how much longer do you anticipate your cross-examination of Mr. Steck?
I would think 20 minutes, a half an hour, maybe longer.
So we'll conclude.
We really, regrettably, we have to wait for our board member to return.
And then we'll conclude this evening and reschedule for the continuation so that the board can conduct its own business.
Okay. Let the record reflect the board members returned to the room. So now we can continue with the hearing.
Okay. All right, Mr. Steck, so we talked about.
As required by law.
That's fine. We've talked about the 7 variances and you've answered my questions to the best of your ability and I appreciate that. We were then going to talk about the gerrymandering argument that you had presented and by using that term, which has to do with political lines, et cetera, named after somebody named Jerry, you're really saying that the configuration of the 2 lots is kind of funky. Would you agree with that? Sit back, please.
I would say it's worse than funky, but the answer is it's variance prone.
Okay. Now, in that respect, we're looking at the separation line on your Exhibit O21. Now, the distance between the dividing line between 41 and 41, I'm sorry, the distance between the common boundary line between 41 and 4101 and the boundary line of Mr. Cove's property. Can you tell me the distance, the approximate distance of that?
You'll have to ask that again. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm trying to get the distance from Mr. Cove's property line to the new proposed property line separating 41 from 4101. Right where your cursor is, right about there.
Yeah, well, if this dimension is 77 feet, that's, could be like 75 feet instead of what normally would be 300.
Okay. So we have kind of, I guess you're suggesting we have kind of a bottleneck there, right?
I called it an hourglass shape.
An hourglass. But that area of 70 some odd feet was certainly plenty of room for the property owner of 41.01 to go from the front of his property to the back of his property if he wanted to walk in the woods, correct?
Yeah, I think you only need like a 4-foot wide path to walk to the back end of his property.
So we have about almost 20 times that 4 feet. It was more than that for somebody to go back and forth in their backyard. Tell me, putting aside that you think it's funky and that variance relief is necessary, how does that distance impact any surrounding property owner?
Because it results in a contorted building envelope that's triangular in shape and forces the house in an unnatural position.
But the house on 41, the only way it is deficient is that it's 75 feet from the road rather than 25 feet from the road. It meets the other requirements, is it
That's
not?
correct. But when variances are being sought, in my opinion, the board can look at the larger picture and to say under the C2 rationale that this is a substantial aesthetic benefit to have a house turned 90 degrees doesn't make sense to me.
Let me ask you this. In terms of the rear yards and the constraints by virtue of the wetlands, which have been delineated in a drawing that the board has seen, and you know where those general areas are, do you not?
I put them on Exhibit 018 if you want me to go there.
What I would like you to do for simplicity, if you can, is to take your cursor and kind of just swirl around where those wetlands are located.
Why don't I go to Exhibit 018 and not swirl?
If it won't take too long, that's okay.
How's that?
Okay, so that's where the wetlands would be, and that is where there would be conservation easements, correct?
That's provided that DEP grants a hardship waiver because
Yes,
yes,
that's a given. Okay.
And if you were going to put only one house on this entire property, DEP would still require a designation by easement.
Would you take your cursor and show the board, because I know where it is and they may, but would you take your cursor and kind of show the board where we're talking about?
Well, the blue, the center of the blue areas, these are the two extraordinary wetlands areas. And at the northern end is the ordinary wetlands for 50 feet. But the blue distance without dark shading, let me just, should be 150 feet. So this is what the applicant is proposing to be the transition area that's reduced from 150 feet.
Okay, so, and I don't beat it to death, but we've talked about that we have to go to the DEP and get their approval. But just so that everybody knows, just outline with the cursor the conservation easement, wetland, lot 41, lot 4101. Would you do that for?
The blue area, if DEP granted a hardship waiver, and so far they've indicated that they would only do it likely for one house. But if they granted it, the blue area would be restricted by a deed.
The whole, everything in blue on your diagram.
That's what I believe the applicant is proposing.
Well, what, there seems to be, there's blue and there's blue. There's blue with stuff in it and there's blue.
Well, the restriction involves the wetlands themselves and the transition areas that surrounds the wetlands.
Okay, all right, thank you. Let's, if you don't mind, go back to A21.
All right, let's see here.
Thank you, Peter. So I think from that, the board has a sense of where the wetlands are and where the property owners who would buy these properties and would know that they were limited in that way. The wetland areas to the rear of these properties, are they wooded or not wooded?
They're generally wooded.
Pretty dense wooding?
Well, it's as you can see from this infrared photo, the area to the rear of the houses have fewer trees. So if the applicant were to push the houses back to 100 feet, presumably there'd be fewer trees that would need to be removed.
But these houses, particularly 41, is kind of surrounded in the back by forest, correct?
The whole back of the property is generally wooded.
Okay. And there's been some questions asked about whether it is a functional rear yard. Did you remember some board members asked those questions?
Yes.
And in terms of a functional backyard, some people like their backyards to be heavily wooded for privacy purposes. Is that not correct?
Yes.
So this, if I went to buy lot 41, if the variance is granted and the house that Mr. Dorn has developed would be built there, I might like the fact that I'm surrounded by forest because my neighbors can't see what I'm doing.
Well, you get to look at function of the rear yard. Because you get to look in your neighbor's property here because of that weird property line.
Well, he would be looking at his neighbor's property and his neighbor's property would be forested as well, right?
All of that area that's in either the wetlands or the transition area, you can't remove the natural vegetation.
Right. So Newmark is looking for a house. He loves this Edward Shippen Lane, and he drives down there and he decides he wants to buy the house that was approved, the lot that was approved by the board and the house that was designed by Mr. Dorn. And he likes that house in particular because it's surrounded by woods as he likes privacy. Is that not a function of a rear yard, sir?
The rear yards can be used. The ordinance doesn't say what you have to or can't do with a rear yard. You can elect to, in this case, you don't have a choice because of the environmental sensitivity. The rear yard here has to be preserved as a wooded area because of the environmental sensitivity of the lot. If you don't like that, you don't buy the house.
But if I like it, I buy the house.
Yes. One house would be great.
Well, I want the one in behind. I want more privacy. I don't want to be next to Mr. Koff. I want to be 2 doors down from him.
Well, then only have one house on the lot and you'll be happier.
I want that second house.
Mr. Newmark,
Yes.
Board Attorney Steve Warner, do you wish to continue the cross-examination? Time is precious for everyone.
What I want to do is ask the board if they wouldn't mind terminating at this point, because it's a pretty good point, if that's okay.
That'd be great. I was going to suggest that we do that.
Since we're going to continue this application, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, may we ask Sonia for available dates?
Yes, please.
Unfortunately, we need to do that on everyone's time right now.
Yes, Mr. Warner, my next available meeting date will be March 7th.
Got to do it right, John. It works for us.
Pending I'm not retired, pending I'm not retired or still alive, I could be available on March 7th.
You're a young man, Peter.
We'll go with that hypothetical, Mr. Steck. So I believe then, for announcement purposes, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, we're going to carry this matter to March 7th, 2022. We are now in at 7 p.m. our new starting time. Correct, Mr. Chairman?
That's correct.
And we're going to assume, unless until otherwise, that it will be remote, the same web-based platform as the location. Mr. Newmark, if you would be kind enough to provide the board in writing, email is fine, an extension of time to actually the end of the month of March 2022, that would be appreciated.
I will do so.
Thank you. And I believe that sufficiently, unless anybody else feels otherwise, cover our carrying of the meeting without further notice to that date, time, and place. Hearing none, I think we're carried.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Be careful out there, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you in March. Thank you. Okay. So we'll continue with the agenda items. Other matters, legislative committee report. Kathy, is there anything you want to report out?
Yes, I have a quick report. The Land Use Committee that is part of the League of Municipalities met, I believe it was December 7th, and they considered 12 different bills that are coming before the state legislature. And two of them I just wanted to highlight here that do seem to have an effect on us. One bill, it's Assembly Bill 6027. The proposal is that DOT should create traffic calming measures toolkit for various traffic calming measures, including such things as engineering practices, speed limit, daily traffic design guidance, signing, market or pavement markings, etc. And the discussion at the meeting was this would be a nice thing to have, but DOT has enough to do. So the recommendation of the committee was no action on that bill. And there was another bill that was discussed also having to do with transportation. This one, if a town wants to enact a speed hump and it has more than 3,000 cars per day, they have to get approval by DOT. This bill would raise that limit to 4,000. And in the case of if it's a speed hump, if it's a speed table with the flat surface, 10 feet. Anyway, the idea is to make it a little easier for towns to enact certain, or the speed table measure. And the discussion at the meeting was this was a good idea, and the vote was to support it. So those are the two bills that were discussed at that meeting that I thought had some relevance to us. And that is my report. And I look forward to Mr. Jorfi joining me on these meetings in the future, which before COVID, they met about 8 times a year. Since COVID, it's been very erratic. And I don't believe a schedule has been established.
Thank you. I look forward to Mr. Jorfi being involved in the committee as well. And I was just thinking, sometimes these really involve a lot of reading, and if other members of the board are interested in participating in some of these committees or being on these committees, reach out to Kathy, reach out to me. And there may be times when we could really use your assistance.
Well, what I would like to see is the bill that we proposed as a resolution and sent to the League of Municipalities in 2019, where we were proposing to amend the MLUL and change the notification requirements to 21 days postmarked before public hearing as opposed to 10. That was our proposal. I'd like to see that get a sponsor, become a bill, and come before the legislature. I think there's a real chance it could pass.
And how does one go about getting a sponsor?
Pardon?
How does one get a sponsor?
Perhaps Mr. Jorfi knows more than I do. I know we've done our part. We've written the resolution. Our professionals did. Thank you, Mr. Warner, and your staff. And it went through the approval process at the League of Municipalities. And then it got sort of jammed up by COVID. And so I'd like to see us revisit that. I think it's a worthwhile proposal, and I would like to see us try to push it forward.
Okay, so we can work on sponsorship of notice requirements. Anything else?
No, that's it.
All right, thank you. And one thing I want to talk about, we talked about this early last year, and we really got bogged down in all of our applications, and we talked about having training for board members, specifically for new board members, but really for all board members. And I want to just kind of throw it out there and talk about, and even for some of the inspection, for some of the committees, maybe the inspection committee or something. At some point, it'd be nice if we could put together board training. And if board members have ideas on this, whether you'd be willing to or welcome, training on how to review applications, what to do when you receive applications, questions to ask, things to be concerned about, maybe ways to reduce time requirements to pass, to review applications. Does anyone have any ideas on this or see the need for training?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and I apologize because I know that was directed to I believe that was directed to the board members, but if I could just weigh in a bit on a related issue.
Sure.
And maybe we could talk about that some more. As our board members know, within 18 months of appointment to the board, all board members must take the DCA certified course for new zoning and planning board members. And my understanding is all our board members, Sonia, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, are compliant with the possible exception of our newest board member. There's an exception for governing body members. It's not a prohibition to take it for governing body members, but there's no requirement for governing body members to take it. So we certainly have our board members all, or soon will have all of our board members qualified in that regard with that course. I up until recently taught that course to the NJPO, as do others. We do also have the materials that I've provided to everyone each year, and Sonia will provide them again if we haven't already this year. We did?
Excuse me?
The materials I provide every year. But we a couple of years ago had a town-wide one. We have a PowerPoint presentation that we put together with the stills, if you will. So that can be recirculated. So certainly from an educational standpoint, we have more than the requirement, but certainly the more the merrier. As far as practical, education, can't volunteer anyone but myself. But maybe that's something that can be done if, depending upon what the board may so desire. I would just respectfully request that we, at least for the currently, we appear to be busy with applications as well as other board business. So it might be the type of thing that if it can be done, it may need to be done if people are amenable, not on a regular meeting night, or at least not one very soon, because we don't want to get backed up with our required board business, including the business of the people, both by way of applications as well as by way of master plan amendments and the like.
Right, thank you. I just wanted to throw that out just for board members to think about. The course that Steve is referencing is excellent. He does have the materials that he created, which I think I need to go back and review myself. But I wanted to throw that out, particularly for the new board members. And the last thing I had in mind, I apologize, Paul, for not contacting you soon, but maybe at some point, could you come up with some sort of briefing for the board members on the master plan? You know, the master plan from 1994, it's been reevaluated, re-examined a few times, just so that board members understand the process. We talked about the master plan and all of these meetings, and a lot of these hearings. And I think it'd be helpful to have some sort of briefing for the board on where things stand, what it is that you do, and things we should be looking for, maybe things that have changed since the last reexamination that we should be looking at going forward. I think it'd be helpful for the board. If you could put something together, no hurry, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think that would be helpful. And that's all right.
Mr. Chairman, we can probably put something together on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think it would be helpful for all of us. We don't talk about the master plan probably as much as we should. It's really kind of our Bible, and it's good to be thinking about the master plan itself. Next item on the agenda, closed session. We have nothing planned for a closed session.
Nothing this evening, Mr. Chairman.
And public commentary. Any members of the public wish to address the board on anything other than applications from this evening? Seeing none. Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman.
Before we adjourn.
I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, it's just, you didn't ask me if the board members had any comments. Apologize if they're stepping on your toes.
No, I'm glad you jumped in.
Microphone's not on?
No, now we can hear you.
Okay, great. So a couple of comments. Having completed my first term on the board, it was very interesting. A couple of things I'd like to ask if we could consider. It'd be good for us to get an idea of what's before us. So we've gone through the worst Gerber application, probably 6 meetings now. I'm not really sure if maybe this is a suggestion. I'm not sure how we can't move these things along quicker. So I don't know whether it's a scheduling thing. I mean, we cut him on time tonight, and assuming March 6th, I don't know if we're going to plan anything else for March 6th.
7th, I think it is, isn't it?
7th, whatever.
Just to be careful with the date, you know.
Yeah, I'm just looking to find out if there's a way that we could schedule these applications and give these applicants a little more time. Just being sensitive to it as a developer, I'm a little afraid to come before Morris Township. I don't think I could afford it. I mean, I don't know if anybody's really focused on how much it costs an applicant to come before the board. The applicant that was here tonight, he's had his, I guess, his planner, he's had his attorney, he's had his engineer. I mean, every time these guys come before us, a couple $1,000s for them. So I'm a little sensitive to that. And I just think that we should all be a little sensitive to that, because I think we want to be a friendly town. I think we want to have people want to develop in Morris Township. And if word gets around that it takes 9 hearings, and I guess I'm exaggerating, but several hearings to get through an application, it's different. 17, exactly. So I'm just asking that, you know, I mean, we've had some special sessions. I know that's important, but I would just ask that if there's a way that we could schedule an applicant and give him adequate time to get their application on the record, and then give us adequate time to deliberate. Because sometimes I feel like we're trying to end an application because we've been here for so many hours. It would be good for an opportunity for us to deliberate a little bit before we make a motion. And and move it forward. So I'm just asking for that. And I'm also asking if there's another, if we could find out what's on the agenda. I mean, we've now moved this thing to March 7th. Obviously, we have 2 hearings in February, I guess. 2 hearings in February? One hearing in February. Okay. So I don't know what's on the February agenda. Is there a way for us to get a preview?
Mr. Chairman, I can weigh in and certainly administratively, it may be difficult or even impossible. I don't know. I don't handle the administrative aspects of the board. But I can say that some other boards in some other towns do have something akin to a pending applications list, pipeline, whatever you wish to call it, at a certain point, maybe when certain things are deemed complete. As we know, our board members know, once something's deemed complete, there's a time frame under the municipal land use law for the board to act on those applications. So it may be, unless we're told otherwise, but it may be something that can be done administratively. I'll defer to Sonia and Jim, that the board can be provided with just a list or a copy of a list that may even already exist administratively as to what's been deemed complete. And then so people can at least see what's pending. Or perhaps when they schedule things, at least see things that are scheduled out a month or two, or at least 2 weeks, if not a month or two. Maybe that would be something that's
I think
helpful
that would
if it's
be-
feasible.
I think it would be very useful because sometimes, I mean, board members have asked me, and I've noticed, you get a package on a Thursday or Wednesday before a meeting and you don't know what's in there. And it'd be really helpful.
Ahead of time, so you could read and know what it is.
But that's only 5 days.
So 5 days before the meeting.
Well, what do we have on for the February meeting? What are the 2 applications?
We have Joseph Savage and Anna Management.
So Savage is a minor subdivision
Subdivision.
property on Starlight Drive. And what was the other one?
Anna Management.
Anna
That's the
Management
Dunkin'
is
Donut.
the old TD Bank on Madison Avenue.
So with all due respect, you're not getting through those 2 applications. And there's no way we're gonna get through both of them. And again, I hope I'm wrong. There's no way we're gonna get through 2 applications on that night. Why are we scheduling 2 applications? By the time we meet again, and I'm not picking on anybody, but Weisgerber's been going on for, I don't know, 8, 9 months. I don't even remember what those houses look like. So I'm gonna ask when we meet again, can you show us the houses again? Just a lot of time lags on it. It's just, I don't know if maybe I'm the only one seeing it. Maybe nobody else, maybe the other board members don't see it this way. Maybe they remember exactly what's going on from meeting to meeting that goes on 7 months in a row.
Here. I don't know if we could have predicted Marty's.
Well, Jim, I don't know that we want to talk about any specific applications that are pending, the hearings of which are pending. But maybe it's best if the administrative personnel see if there's a way in which there could be something akin to a pending application, because what we're discussing right now for the next meeting is great, but it might be easier and save more time if people could just plot it out a couple of meetings ahead of time, and so everybody could just see what the pending applications are, and then we try to keep the schedule moving along that way.
I think that'd be very helpful. And it occurred to me, looking at the date on the inspection committee report for this application, it was in September. So whenever the inspection committee or the fire, when they're going out to do their reviews, that would be a good time for us to be informed that, as a board, that this application is pending, and then we know to be expecting it.
I would like to weigh in, Mr. Chair, if that's okay.
Yes, of course.
So a couple of things here. One is I agree that it would be helpful to have a little bit of like a heads up of what's coming in the next couple of meetings. It could be as simple as what we just did, say what the applications are in the next couple of meetings. That's just helpful to know. I agree with Mr. Alesso's point about, especially when we have applications that take a long time, we need to, I don't know what the solution is, but I do know that we need to figure out a way to wrap it up, in my opinion. And the other thing, as far as pending applications, I wanted to highlight, I've mentioned this before, the governing body passed a packet of land use resolutions. I believe it was resolution 112 that talks about posting on our website land use applications that have been deemed complete. And the application for the TD Bank is deemed complete. And, you know, in accordance with that resolution, it should be posted on our website. And I know we've talked about this there. What we've been doing is posting the application as a link when the agenda comes out. But I think in accordance with the resolution that we passed, the application is supposed to be posted on the website when the application is complete, which would be now. And I think I would like to see us do that. And that is, if you go back and look at the language in the resolution, that's what it says.
I think that would be very helpful. You know, any other board members want to chime in?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I want to make some comments, and I agree with most of the comments that other board members have made. And I've been wondering about, for some time now, I've been wondering what other planning boards do in other towns, because it does seem like our process is very slow, and people may complain that our hearings are extremely protracted and that we have, you know, sometimes 10 or more hearings on a particular matter. I don't really think that it's we who are slowing down the hearings, though. But I'd be curious to know, particularly from people in this group who have experience with other planning boards in other towns, what do they do to process their business? What do they do to get things done quicker? And I try to imagine what it would be like if we were a bigger town. You know, we've got 25,000 people in our town, roughly. Suppose we had 75,000 people in our town. The towns that size, cities that size, they still only have one planning board. They must have a lot more business that they need to push through. How do they do it? You know, what are the keys to being more efficient? I look back at what happened with El Barton, for example, where we had, I think, 14 hearings. I don't think it was mainly the planning board members that were slowing those down with their comments and their questions. I think it was primarily the witnesses for and against. So I'm not sure what the solution is, but I feel like there must be some good ideas out there. And I'd like to hear more from people who have some experience from other locales.
Mr. Chairman, and I guess also legal counsel, is the board allowed to have a work session that's closed?
The closed session is under the Open Public Meetings Act. There's only specific designated reasons why you can have a closed session, litigation, et cetera, personnel and the like. The training's a different story, but we could talk about a training session and if it could be closed or not. Open Public Meeting Act requires that other than the 7 or 9, I forget, specified items be in an open session. So, but I think maybe just again to the point, I have the benefit of being involved with multiple other land use boards and multiple other municipalities. The pending applications or whatever you want to call it is something that is helpful to keep track, and so people know what's coming up and people know how to schedule a little bit better, and advanced scheduling can be done. And it doesn't have to be done during the meeting. It can be done in advance of the meeting so that we know, you know, we don't waste time during the meeting as to when things are going to be scheduled to be carried, number one. And number two, the rest is as I think Board Member Quillen and others point out, you can't necessarily, it's a due process. It's a quasi-judicial process, and you can't necessarily dictate how quickly attorneys and witnesses, both for applicants and for objectors and members of the public, get through their questions and answers and testimony and the like. Certainly, as a board, through the leadership of our chair, with the assistance of our board professionals, you can have due process and have justice, but you can do it swiftly. You don't want to forsake justice for swiftness, but you can have swift justice. So maybe we can all together work on moving hearings quicker, particularly in light of the experience with the Del Barton hearings and the current Weisgerber application, without talking about them specifically. I do note that some of the same attorneys and witnesses participated in both. So we can all do our best, I think, to help move that along quicker with the leadership from the chair.
I've
Steve,
noted
this
in
is
the
Linda.
past that.
Steve,
Go
this
ahead.
is Linda Murphy. Just a quick question. I noticed in both of the applications that you referenced, we heard the same information over and over and over again, multiple times, in multiple sessions. Part of it, I suppose, was because they were protracted application hearings. And so there was a desire to make sure that we were all up to speed, but hearing the same testimony in multiple hearings, I think is one of the reasons that we're moving so slowly. And I don't know what can be done about that, but we've talked about everything we heard tonight before, multiple times, and we heard it again tonight. So my view is, if we could just get people to move the ball forward and not keep repeating themselves, that would help us tremendously relative to getting applications to a closure.
I've mentioned previously, and I think it's critical that the board members, review the plans, and quite often there's questions that are asked that, in my view, it sounds as though the plans have not been reviewed, or if you did review the plans or the package of information that's been submitted, that question has been answered. I know, Kathy, you've brought up this issue in the past where you like to ask questions to kind of inform the public because they may not know, what's going on. They may not have seen the plans. They may not have seen, all the information. But I know that's, something that does, potentially slow things down. And I have to agree with Joe, and I have to take blame on, scheduling, 2 hearings. I agree. I think I'm just going to have to readjust my approach, that there's no way that we're going to get through those 2 applications in one meeting. And the way the board processes applications, they're not as quick as they've been processed in the past. And that I think we're going to have to adjust the scheduling and just put one item on, until we see that things, move forward faster. There are a lot of factors that come into play, as we've seen on some of these other applications. And it may be a factor of the witness, maybe a factor of the attorney, or, who's asking questions. But it is important that the board members, review the plans and know the package of information. It helps to visit the site and see it in person. Zoom has added a significant challenge and more workload for Sonia's office and my office. And, the items that the committee would like to do, we'll work to get on those items posted, but that's, increasing the workload, and it takes away from other things. You got to keep that in mind, that, those things take more time, and it's adding more things onto the list, to be done. And I totally understand, where you're coming from, but you need to realize that that's, it's adding, workload, and, the wheels slow down as more work is added.
Could you be, which item are you talking about there, Jim?
Out of everything that I just covered?
No, when you were referencing the extra work that's created, were you talking about all of the things that we've talked about, or particular things?
Posting in advance, more, it's, something it's going to happen, but it's, it's more work. The Zoom meetings, setting up the Zoom meetings, sending out the links, All that stuff is stuff that we hadn't had to do before. That's a time suck. It takes time away from other things. Including, notice outside of standard 200-foot limits that we've done on certain applications. It's a lot more work involved in that. Not only for Sonia, it's other township employees that get involved with that stuff. These items all, take more time. And I understand the benefit of it, to get the word out to, members of the public, get the word out sooner. I agree. I think it would be helpful to have this, maybe we do a recap at the end of the meeting. Hey, this is what's coming up for the next meeting, or we, we can work on that.
Helpful.
But we'll work on, getting more information out there. But I think that we have to readjust the schedule on what we feel that the board can process in a timely fashion. And 2 applications in one evening is not an option. So we'll adjust that accordingly.
I think that might make a difference because all the focus will be at one time. I think that's a good idea. And part of the idea I had in training is that if board members understood the important relevant items to what the decision is based upon and not a lot of fluff that a consultant throws in there, it might help narrow down the questions and be able to make that go a lot faster than wondering about this because a consultant said that, or wondering about this because it was brought up. But if it's not really an issue relative to the variance itself, maybe it's superfluous and those questions can be avoided. That's part of what I had in mind.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to echo that. I think you're right on target. I think sometimes, with no disrespect to any of us, including myself, we have a tendency to ask questions that really don't have to do with the application. Wondering what they're going to be doing inside the facility when they're asking for an application to put in a generator. With all due respect, the applicant tonight told us exactly what they were going to use the generator for, and we were wondering what other things need a generator. Why aren't you using a generator for this? They told us what they needed the generator for. Our job tonight was just to improve the outside. And again, that's no disrespect. I think we've all been there. We've gotten ourselves carried away with
Absolutely.
Columbriums, whatever those things that we approved in the cemetery.
Right. Absolutely.
So anyway, echoing your comment.
Okay.
Another thing that I wanted to say is once an application is deemed complete, that board has certain amount of time to act on the applications. So I am working on the time constraint, okay, when applications are deemed complete, when they come in. My head is a time clock, okay? Every time an application comes in, I have to keep track of when that application came and when action has to be taken, okay? So my head is a time clock. Every time an application comes in.
And with those pending application lists, once they're deemed complete, that information is generally, at least in my experience in other towns, other boards, reflected on that. In other words, the time to act is 120 days. That ends on such a date.
Exactly.
So that information can all be, and I believe Sonia keeps that information. If it can just be shared once deemed complete with the board as a whole, then everybody can see what's coming up and when it's the time for us to complete the hearing is, and recognize that applicants extend time to act all the time. That's not the goal. We prefer to get them all done so they don't have to. But if all that information is provided to the board as a whole, and we all do our best administratively to reasonably anticipate what can be handled and when, not overshooting it, too many applications on one night, or undershooting it. Last thing you want is to have a 45-minute meeting, as attractive as that may be, and find out we could have heard that second case, but now we can't because it wasn't scheduled, it wasn't noticed for that date. So these are all things that have to be focused. Unfortunately, there's a lot of dynamics and things that push in one direction or the other, but I think having that list will help us all focus on what's coming, when's it coming, and how best to schedule. I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, thank you. It would be. Any other board members want to weigh in?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would, following Jim's comment that we need to spend more time looking at the plans and understanding them going into the meetings, I completely agree with. But that does require that we get them, especially if we're going to only have, if we end up scheduling one application per meeting and we don't get the package till 5 days before the meeting, that doesn't give us a lot of time to understand. The advantage of things drawn out a little bit is that you have the first meeting to kind of understand what's going on, and then you can look at the plans in reference to that. So if we're going to do that and hope to move things forward, having access to the plans sooner would be a big benefit, I think, in order to better understand the application before we see it.
Under that scenario, you're making it sound like every meeting, every application should have 2 meetings where, I think the board needs to be prepared and, should be able to get through an application in one evening if it's something that's pretty straightforward. I think we can work on, maybe getting you guys the plans a few more days in advance. A lot of times we're waiting for, resolutions and, there's different stuff that kind of holds up the package going out, but I think we can work on getting them out, maybe a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I understand that the whole thing, and we get, there's changes later on, and I understand that that's an issue. But yeah, the earliest, at least personally, the sooner that I get a chance to see them, the better that I have a chance to absorb them and what's going on and understand the application before we get into a meeting. So that would be helpful, knowing that it's not easy. I realize that's a lot of stuff to go through, but they do get posted eventually. If they could be done a little earlier, that would be very helpful.
I would like to say also that I like our new having a hard stop at 10:30. I think that's a good idea. And I appreciate the opportunity to just share a few ideas like this. I don't recall us doing that last year at all. And so it's helpful to have an opportunity to, kind of share ideas a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's very important. I'm really glad that we got to do this. Anything else? Resolution to adjourn?
I make the motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Joseph Alesso made the motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 See you February 4th, February 7th.
Sony's gonna yell at me.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Aye.
The,